now he's the chairperson of the New African People's Organization. And we'd like to bring on right now Brother Chokwe Lumumba.
I want to bring up one of you brothers and sisters warm and revolutionary greetings. Now, I just came up from Jackson, Mississippi, so y'all need some warm greetings, right? But actually, when I speak of these warm greetings, I'm not really talking about the environment as it relates to the climate outside. Because if we look at our situation today, then we'll find that it's social, political, an economic environment which is cold. It's not the physical environment which we're most concerned about. In fact, it's not only cold, but if you examine it, it's cold-blooded. And the reason why it's cold-blooded is because cold-blooded people are the ones who are running the society today. I bring you revolutionary greetings because I think in the history of times, when we think about what has happened in America, when we look at the fact that this is a country which was stolen from the Native Americans, and then it's a place that they stole with us to bring us here in order to develop the country. If we look at the bombs that they dropped just recently over in Iraq, bombing people day after day after day after day, and then cry crocodile tears because a few Scud missiles land in Israel. If we look at the climate in America today as well as yesterday, then we realize that there's no place in the world which deserves a revolution more than the United States of America. So we bring you all warm and revolutionary greetings. And on behalf of the New African Independence Movement, the movement which seeks the independence of our people in America as well as around the world, I once again say, free the land.
Free the land, right.
It's always good to be here in Chicago. I see Brother Dr. Andy Thompson, who we go back a long ways. Because I guess our gray hairs can tell we go back a little ways. But and Larry Kennan is a brother who participated with me in the Pontiac case. Pontiac case, for those who may not know, is a case of 16, actually it was originally 17, then 16 brothers who were accused of killing 3 white prison guards in Pontiac, Illinois. There was only 3 guards killed, but they claimed that each one of these brothers killed them, you know. So in other words, you had 3 guards killed, what we say must have been killed in 15 different ways, right, all together, we ended it up. But actually, this was a case which would have been one of the biggest executions in history, had they been successfully in the United States in history. And the biggest one before that was when they executed about 21 soldiers in Brownsville, Texas, back in, I think it was 1920. We were fortunate that we were able to win that case, and the Pontiac brothers still live. This is one of the many battles that I've had the pleasure of participating in the courtroom on behalf of our liberation struggle. And I think that you should give Brother Kennan and Brother Thompson and all those warriors who have been around for a long time battling in different arenas, because we have to battle in different arenas in order to win this struggle. I want you to give them all, you know, a hand for that. Today, my brothers and sisters, we want to just stop for a minute and chat. We just want to rap for a while and talk about the situation that we find ourselves in. These are serious times. We are bedeviled people, being beleaguered by many different situations which confront us here and which confront our brethren and sisters around the world. We live in a country right here today where you have a United States president who will send you over to Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Iraq in order to give your life, in order to win the freedom of a place that wasn't free in the first place. We'll send you over into the deserts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq in order to put your life on the line. At the same time that right here in this empire, the United States empire, what they call a nation, they won't even sign a civil rights bill. They say you really don't need a civil rights bill because, of course, you're free over here. You live in a country where today there are more young black men in prison than there are in the colleges and the universities. The number of black men have literally quadrupled over the last 10 years. We have seen the prison population rise from in 1980 to some 200,000, and now it's beating on the door of 1 million. And they promise that they will be able to put more than 1 million people behind bars within the next few years. We live in a situation where really, in real terms, perhaps 40 to 45 to 50% of our youthful population is unemployed. And when we count all of those that they consider to be unemployable, then you find out that the older population is not really much farther behind. You actually live in a time, though, where you have a few more jobs, and yet you make less money. You have more jobs than you did 5 years ago, yet you make less money than you did 5 years ago. Now you figure that one out. The reason is that the industrial infrastructure of the United States is disintegrating. And as it disintegrates, you are being displaced from the industrial jobs that we used to work when we moved from the plantation to the plant. And right now we are being incorporated into the United States' so-called service industry. So what do? We work at Burger King or Burger Chef or McDonald's. We work at jobs for minimum wage. We work at jobs where actually we make just enough money to get back and forth to work and sometimes pay a babysitter. We work at jobs which are the kind of jobs that would make children go to the street to sell drugs, because they're the kind of jobs which are dead-end jobs, no promise jobs. We live in a situation today where we are living in an empire, the American empire, where black men are pitifully poor, yet black women and black children are poor yet. This has caused all kinds of social destabilizations on our street. And so we have young brothers and sisters who kill each other and older brothers and sisters who kill each other. We have a situation where drugs actually constitute one of the gamest ways of employment in our cities today. It is very difficult to show somebody a TV which promotes Rolls Royces and all kinds of lavish wealth on a daily basis. Show someone billboards which does the same thing, newspapers which does the same thing, which actually equates self-esteem with material wealth. And then at the same moment ask them to work at a place where they will never have it. And they know this. And so they have created conditions in our community which are calculated to bring about the destruction of our community in whole or in part. They know the day that they dry up those drugs or dry up those jobs and put out those drugs, that you will wind up on the corner selling it. But this problem that we have is not a problem which is anywhere near unique to us here in America. All over the world, our people are bedeviled with the same situation. And I think that what I'd like to talk about for a few minutes today, before I get into talking about what I feel to be some of the important solutions to the problem, is the new characteristics that the problem is taking on. The problem is actually the same. You should never be deceived into feeling that you are being treated, that the problem is any different today than it was 200 or 300 years ago. Your problem started when they snatched the first African off the African continent, and your problem has not ended yet. It's the same problem. Malcolm put it very eloquently once when he explained. They asked him, they said, well, Brother Malcolm, can't you say that, brothers and sisters, that the black people, that their conditions have changed? And Malcolm says that's irrelevant. Perhaps our conditions have changed, but our position has not changed. He says that if I'm on an airplane going 100 miles an hour and I'm sitting in the back of the plane, and then the plane speeds up and it goes 1,000 miles an hour, you can argue that my condition has changed, but the problem is that my position has not changed. I was in the back of the plane when it was going 100 miles an hour, and so I'm in the back of the plane when it's going 1,000 miles an hour. And the problem is that there's somebody in the front of the plane sitting in the seat where I need to be. There's somebody driving the plane or flying the plane that's sitting in the seat that I need to be in. Because if anybody can speed the plane up, then surely enough, they can slow the plane down. And this is the situation that we find ourselves in today. There's all kinds of decisions which the Supreme Court of the United States has reached in the past saying that black folks had the right to jobs or affirmative rights, affirmative action. Various different decisions which have been made, which were said to be the promise of freedom. They've taken it all back, and they're taking it all back. We're having jobs snatched from us. We're having various different educational situations snatched from us. We're declining in virtually every area of human endeavor. And so when we look at ourselves today, we realize that the problem is a lack of self-determination. The problem is a lack of self-defense. The problem is a lack of self-respect. If you had the proper self-defense, the ability to defend yourself, then you wouldn't have Brother King being beaten to death by Los Angeles police out there a few weeks ago. If we had the right kind of self-respect, then you wouldn't have children selling drugs. We wouldn't go to so-called black institutions where they teach less about black history than they actually do in the white institutions. If we understood our need for self-determination, then we wouldn't have to depend upon an economic system which has held us at the bottom since we have been here. And so what it is that we need all three elements. And the problem has been the same, the deprivation of each. The problem has taken on new characteristics, and you have to recognize it when you see it. And so this is why we must talk about it. In most instances today, when our people are oppressed, the conveyors of oppression, the agents of oppression, the lackeys of oppression, the one who actually do the oppression, in more instances than not, are actually people who look like us. They look the same way we do. They have the same chocolate-colored skin and kinky hair if they haven't fried it, you know what I mean? And if they haven't changed their nose or did something to their facial complexion, they look like we do. And this is a method that the system uses to try to confuse you about the source of oppression. Just recently, I was down at Grambling State University, a place that you know for producing football players. Along with the football players that they produce, and many of us have had many a proud moment thinking about the SWAC football players that conference has produced. Unfortunately, that's not all they produce at Grambling State University. They also produce what we call plantation mentalities, and they produce them in mass. Here's a place that they don't have as many black history programs or black studies programs as they do at the average community college in the city. White-run community college. At Grambling State University just recently, they suspended 15 black students in a situation which occurred where the students were beaten up by police, essentially because they stood up to object to the prosecution of a couple of brothers who stood up at a Black History Month program outraged because they had invited a white speaker to speak at a Black History Month program who had never even heard a Black History lecture before, had never read a Black History book before, knew nothing about Black history, yet he was the featured speaker at the Black History program. So the brothers took it into their own hands to make sure he didn't speak. They helped him off the stage, and somebody else took the microphone. Now the white guy, he didn't even raise the question. He didn't prosecute. But Grambling State University and the automatons, you know what an automaton is? That's a Negro on automatic. You understand what I'm saying? They don't even need white people to remind them what they're supposed to do. They're on automatic. They automatically do what the white people want them to do. So they had to prove to the white power structure that they could maintain discipline amongst their Negro students at Grambling State University. And so essentially they put these brothers on trial and were charging them with assault on the white boy. Now to beat that, the white boy didn't even show up at the hearing, right? So he wasn't even there to testify. And assault, for those who understand it, means is that you're put in reasonable apprehension. You're afraid of somebody. Someone threatens you. Now, how did they know that he was threatened if he ain't there to say he was threatened, right? I mean, how are they going to read his mind? But they convicted the students, and they convicted 15 other black students who stood up for these students and put them out of school. And said that they couldn't go to school because they hadn't come in and apologized to the school. Now, these are the same Negroes that's afraid to stand up to the white people who are trying to snatch the school from them today. Yet they will come in and act in a tyrannical fashion toward the students. Grambling is just one of many different examples of an epidemic which runs throughout our cities and our communities. It's an epidemic that we see as far away as Africa. When you look in southern Africa and see the Negroes who are beating up our people on the street, they are Negroes. They're black like me and you. These are the ones that the white power structure has now employed to do their work. In many instances, the brutality which occurs in our community are because of black police officers. In many instances, or blacks who stand by as whites beat us up, all right, and call us niggas and various other and do various other unsavory things to us. So what we have is the Negro being used as the tool of oppression. In some instances, we actually have Negroes who have been placed in a position where they feel that their financial interest is based upon the way that they serve the white power structure. So in the city of Detroit, where we have a person who was once thought to be a well-respected black man, but now has turned out to be nothing but a Negro, right? To study this epidemic of handkerchief headism, because this is what I call it. You know, we'll have to create the science of handkerchief headism, right? What we can do is to look at the recent trip of Brother Nelson Mandela through the United States Empire. And let me just say as an aside, because I don't like to say anything which I don't define or explain. Why do I call the United States an empire? Well, you think about it for a minute, and you will call it an empire. You shouldn't call it a nation. You first of all should call something what it is. Now, what did you call Rome? They call it an empire, right? Because these folks started out in a little bitty city and they stole everybody else's land. That's why they call it an empire. What did you call Britain? You called it an empire because they started on a little bitty island and they took everybody's stuff. Now, the United States didn't even start from a little city or a little island. They jumped off the boat stealing everybody's land, right? So if you took everything away from them that they shouldn't have, they would have to go back on the Mayflower. And so this is why we call it an empire. They stole the Native Americans' land. They moved across the American continent under the notion of manifest destiny, which means that God gave them the right to do it, right? Manifest destiny. White men take all. Stole the upper part of Mexico, and now they make it illegal for Mexicans to cross borders which are illegal in the first place. And then they stole us and brought us over here in order to develop one of the most powerful economic systems that has ever been built. And so this is an empire, and this is why we call it that. But as Brother Mandela came to the United States Empire, two things happened. One of them was very good. Our people demonstrated their devout love for a person who had given 27 years of his life because of being arrested for the struggle of African people. This is to be celebrated. And I think that we can find in our communities almost without reservation, black people, African people, irrespective of what the media was saying about Mandela. And you have to say, I was really happy to see the brother crucify that old cracker on TV. What's the cracker's name? I can't think of his name. The big head cracker. Yeah, big head copper, right? Right. He just tore the cracker apart, right? He just ate him up, you know, and then I had the nerve to shake his hand afterwards. You know? And, you know, the cracker was falling apart. He was shattered, you know. But they tried to cross him up because he had some alliances with Gaddafi. And they tried to make him say that Gaddafi was a bad person, he was a terrorist. And for those who know a little bit about Libya and have been to Libya and know Gaddafi, know that as far as the Arab world goes, Gaddafi is probably the most supportive person in that world as it relates to African people. And Gaddafi is a person who lives independent of the United States and independent of Russia. So they call him a madman. Anybody who lives independent of the two leading Caucasian empires in the world, they call him crazy, right? And so this is true. And he wouldn't divorce his relationship with Fidel Castro. He talked about Fidel. He said, when I needed help, Fidel would help me. You didn't help me, right? He pointed out just like he should. And he wouldn't divorce his relationship with the Palestinian people because he realized that the Palestinian people are basically in the same position that we're in. And we should understand that. We should first of all understand that we're Africans and that we should unite as Africans, fight as Africans, and seek our self-respect, self-defense, and self-determination as Africans. But we should also understand that there are people in the world who are similarly situated to us, and we need to understand their struggle and not get bulldozed out of understanding their struggle and get all confused and wind up supporting an enemy thinking that you're supporting a friend. We should understand the Palestinians' predicament. Now, a lot of us, you know, have problems with Arabs and things of that nature because of what the Arabs that come here do to our people in our communities. This is true in Detroit. This is true in New York. And I don't even know, I haven't been in Chicago lately, but it's probably true right here in Chicago, right? But then you have to understand the source of that. The Arab that you're dealing with here in the United States is not the oppressed Palestinian who's getting kicked in the butt every day like you getting kicked in the butt. The Arab that you're dealing with here is the same Arabs that were back there oppressing the Palestinians before the Palestinians booted them out, so the United States gave them a better place to come over here and oppress you. The same thing is true with the so-called Chaldean Christian Arabs that come from Iraq. The same thing is true with the Vietnamese and the Korean. These are all people who were aligned with the United States, and when they got to the point where they could no longer oppress their own people, they sent them over here to oppress you. They all come over looking for the streets paved with gold in America. And the United States points them right to the streets. Say, like, you go right down there where those niggas live. Those are the streets that paved with gold. And they say, don't look like there's no streets got no gold down there. So you look, we know they got gold. Because we exploited them, the Jews exploited them, everybody exploited them, and everybody who did came out rich, right? And so those are the streets that's paved with gold. But we must understand that, you know, we have allies in this world and be consistent with that. But when Brother Mandela came here and took these principled positions, we were proud of it. But the very demoralizing factor about his visit here is the fact that it seemed that all the people that the organizers of the tour decided to associate him with on the tour were people who believed in absolutely nothing that he stood for. Now, we have to be correct and accurate about our analysis of the situation. Where did he go when he came here, and who did he go there with? First of all, he went to Boston. And in Boston, he went up there and met with Kennedy and them, and went up and spoke in some park, and the NAACP in Boston had to protest the fact that they weren't letting enough black people come to hear him speak because of where he was speaking at. Then he went down to New York. And who did he hook up with in New York, or who did they hook him up with in New York? They tried to not let him speak in Harlem. They told him he couldn't speak out there in Brooklyn. And then the brothers and sisters in Harlem says if he don't speak in Harlem, then he don't speak in New York, right? He says he's not going to speak out at the stadium, the Yankee Stadium, if he's not going to speak in Harlem. They threatened to close the subways down. And so the people who were organizing the tour, and I'm not putting this on Mandela, I'm telling you, the people that was organizing the tour had to back down and take him to Harlem. And he gave one of his best speeches in Harlem, and got some of the best speeches given to him in Harlem, too. And so, but what happened essentially is that he was running, they had him running in the crowd with old Dinkins. That's the fellow's name, right? Yeah, right, Dinkins, over in New York. Now, Dinkins, here's a fella who feels that he has to go overseas, and he goes to Israel wearing a Hanukkah, walking around talking about he's a Jew. And at the same time, he doesn't even go down to Africa and deal with our people who are suffering from apartheid. Here's a man that when our people stand up in Brooklyn and stand up to the harassment and the murders that's going on, he calls the people standing up to the harassment and the murders thugs. We told the brothers and sisters in New York when they elected Dinkins, which was something that you could understand because they had Koch in them, you understand what I'm saying? I mean, Koch was a real enigma to people, but we had to say at the time that he was elected that the brothers' best days were already behind him, right? And he's shown that. And so what he did is he refused to allow, or tried to refuse to allow, revolutionary Puerto Ricans and other revolutionaries who had come to join Mandela to even sit on the stage. He tried to keep Mandela out of Harlem, tried to keep Mandela out of Brooklyn. Dinkins, walking around with his Hanukkah, was not the kind of person who Mandela should have associated with because he doesn't believe or support any of the people that Mandela supported. We then went down to Atlanta, and the old bourgeois Negro clique, which has been around Atlanta for a long time, seized control. They took him and they put him up in the place, and they wouldn't let the masses come in to hear him speak. It was only the bourgeois Negroes who could come hear him speak, and white folks. This is true. I mean, I hate to say this about people, but we have to understand what is happening. The same kind of Negroes who hid the fact from us that the Ku Klux Klan was involved with the killing of our kids in Atlanta way back in the 1980s are the same kind of people who were courting Mandela, acting like they had some kind of empathy with him and his struggle down in Atlanta. It got so ridiculous that Mandela had to protest himself. because they came in and the first thing they gave them was a bottle of Coca-Cola, right? Now, as everybody knows, that they're boycotting Coca-Cola, and the South African brothers and sisters are calling for the boycott of Coca-Cola because they are one of the companies down there exploiting people in South Africa. And so he refused to take the bottle of Coca-Cola. And they had a big Coca-Cola sign up right there on the stage where he was. I mean, you know, this kind of insanity. Then he went to Detroit. Coleman Young. I mean, these are people who are, these are the political dead, I'm telling you. These are people in their cities who have been booed and, you know, by our people. This is not to say that these folks haven't made some kind of contribution at some time. But look, if you're going to be real, you got to stay on the track. And so we got to tell it like it is, because they are being used as instruments of our oppression. They found out just recently in Detroit that Coleman Young was selling South African cougar rounds on the side. I'm telling you. This, I mean, they caught him. His company was selling South African cougar rounds. He's the one that refused to support the divestment movement and tried to have some of us arrested in Detroit when we protested against General Motors being over there in South Africa. Then we went out to Uncle Tom out in Los Angeles. Good old Uncle Tom Brad, right? Good old Uncle Tom. The guy who had given the key to the city to South African dignitaries, white South African dignitaries, 5 years before Mandela get there. And he appointed to the security of the Mandela security force one of the agents who testified against Geronimo Pratt, one of our political prisoners here in the United States. And Geronimo Pratt is somebody we can talk about in the question and answer period. But he was one of the Panthers. And one of the fellows that helped put him in jail for all of his life was the person who was put in the head of the Mandela security force. And at the same time, you had CIA agents that were supposed to be his security. And for those who understand history, know that the CIA are the ones who put him in jail in the first place because they told the South Africans where he was. And so we went up, and it goes on and on. Up in Oakland, he had somewhat of a break. Sister Richardson, you probably know what I'm talking about out there at the bookstore out in there, you know, who's a renowned black historian, and also a strong sister, Ray Richardson, I think her name. Yeah. Right. Yeah, right. And they were out there, and they entertained him, although there was still some handkerchief heads in that bunch. Now, what is the problem here? What is the problem? I think that we have to ask ourselves how this non-leadership leadership has taken control of our movement. Cheerleadership has taken control of our movement. Cheerleadership, they cheer for Nixon in 1 year and cheer for Carter or cheer for somebody else, you know. Non-leadership, people that talk you out of struggle rather than talking you into struggle. We have to ask ourselves. And what we see is that the government has used a very slick process. In the 60s and in the 70s, when our people were in the streets moving, they used a two-part process. One was to use the sword to cut the head off of the militant movement. So right here in Chicago, they shot down and killed Fred Hampton. At the same time, all over the country, they were shooting grassroots leaders in the street, or otherwise defaming these leaders to the point where the masses were being taught that they were dangerous people, or that they were some other kind of unsavory or unfit types. They even did it with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They tried to discredit him, and then eventually what they did is they essentially killed him. And so all over the country, this kind of thing was happening with the grassroots leadership who was in support of activism. It didn't make any difference whether you were a nationalist or whether you were a socialist or what you were, as long as you were consistent and genuine about changing the situation in America, then they made you a target of the counterintelligence program. And this is what it was called. And they used the same methodology against us that they've used against Fidel Castro, against Patrice Lumumba, against various other leaders and various other movements around the world. And so as our grassroots leadership was being eliminated, they were busy trying to put into position people who were no leadership at all. At some of the very schools that we seized buildings and created black studies programs, they were able to get the students out of the schools who took the buildings over and forced the black study program and put people in charge of the black studies programs who didn't even support the black study programs when we were fighting for them. And some of the very programs that we caused to be created in the communities, they were able to get people who were opposed to the work that was done to get the programs and put them in charge of the programs. And these people show up on the scene, and you be a young person coming along, don't know what has happened. They talk all this militant talk. I used to hang around with Fred Hampton, right? Yeah. Don't mention the fact that they used to be the guy that was spying on him. You know what I'm saying? I was down with Malcolm X, right? Yeah, you helped bring Malcolm X down. That's what you did. You know what I'm saying? And so these were the kinds of folks that they put in these positions and put out in front of us, and they discredited other people, caused people to break up in their families, caused people to lose their jobs. Literally, hundreds were killed, hundreds more went to prison. Others were discredited or left unemployed in various other ways. At the same moment that they were working that, then they were offering the carrot to those who would cooperate. They gave us all a few more positions in colleges. They let us all go to law school a little more. Some of us went to medical school, and some of us got a job for a little while. And so what happened is that much of the leadership of the movement became either sold out or confused. They became confused because they did not realize that it was not just the job that we were fighting for. We were fighting to take control of the factory itself. It was not just the opportunity to get in the door and to go to school that we were fighting for. We were fighting for the opportunity to take over the school itself. And not just to take it over and run it like white folks used to run it, but to take it over and turn it into an Afrocentric, a new African institution. One which would teach the self-respect, self-defense, and self-determination of our people. And so that kind of strategy, it put us in a situation as our youth come up now, that many of the people who pose as our leaders are actually our worst enemies, are the tools of a power structure that would do us wrong. Now, with the recent thing that occurred in the Persian Gulf, what we have seen is an extension of white supremacy on a worldwide level, and reaffirmation of white supremacy on a worldwide level. The extension of white supremacy occurs when George Bush talks about the creation of a new world order. And at the same time, listen to him now, a new world order. At the same time, he's calling the other guy Hitler, you know what I'm saying? Now, this is what Hitler was talking about. This is precisely what Hitler was talking about, a so-called new world order. Now, and then let me say at the beginning of this discussion, is that this is not a hoorah Saddam Hussein rally. Saddam Hussein, first of all, was working with the United States less than a year ago. So as far as I'm concerned, he couldn't be all that cool, right? So, but by the same token, though, you have to understand the strategy which is being employed here. The strategy is not to do anything to Saddam Hussein. In fact, they haven't really done anything to Saddam Hussein. The strategy is to destroy the infrastructure of the people. One of the things that the Ba'ath Party in Iraq had done is created one of the most progressive economies in the Arab world. Just like the same thing that occurred in Libya. The wealth that was produced by the oil wells was spread amongst the people. You didn't have a sheik. You didn't have what did they call this joker? An emirate, or whatever, all these kinds of clowns. Sleazy individuals who take all the people's money and spend more time chasing ladies in Los Angeles than they do back home in their palaces, governing people. And this is the kinds of things that you have in Kuwait. This is what you had in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia, people literally live in squalor, right? That kind of thing does not happen in some of the countries which they fight against the most. And so, but what it was about was destroying the infrastructure of that country. To take total control and to say that you don't, to give a message to the non-white world that under no circumstances do you dare stand up against the power of the United States. The methods which are employed in doing this are much more sophisticated than they used to be. It used to be that they try to take out Fidel Castro and people would get upset because he was a popular leader. It used to be that they killed Patrice Lumumba and people would understand that he was a righteous leader. And so what has happened now is that they have begun to demonize leaders, to create them as devils, or either to position people in leadership with their help who actually are negative characters, and then to use their positioning in leadership as an excuse to destroy the infrastructure of the country. They did it with Noriega. They actually did it before that in Grenada with CORE, in situation of that. What they do is they get people and they position them in leadership. They put Noriega in leadership. He was the CIA's choice. He was George Bush's buddy. We got pictures of them sitting down chatting with each other, probably talking about drugs, right? Because they have reports saying he was selling drugs. In fact, he was selling drugs to help them raise money for the Contra effort. This is what he was doing. And so, there's all kinds of information which support this. But what they do is to get him in a position, and then when the people demand their rights to the Panama Canal without all these concessions that they're trying to get, then what they do is, under the excuse of trying to get Noriega, they butcher the country, bury over 3,000 people in graves which are unmarked, and take the country apart, and right now the country is living in absolute squalor. You go where the United States has been and you will see absolute squalor. You go to Grenada, a place that was on the uptrend, which was building its economy, building its political system, had all kinds of enthusiastic people back under Maurice Bishop, and you will go there and you will see absolute squalor today. And you will see the same thing in Iraq. Everywhere that the United States touches, they destroy. And you see that all over the world. And so, but what has happened is by creating a demon of the leader, they create a target, or a supposed target, a false target, which then gets us thinking that they're doing something righteous. And then at that time, we'll get our people thinking, hopefully nobody in this room is silly enough to feel that way. And then they will do is they will go out and sometimes get caught up in the United States effort, which is basically to extend white supremacy. You know, these things really aren't that complicated. Most of the time, all you have to do is ask yourself what side the United States government is on, and then you either get on the other side, or at least don't stay on their side. That's generally the correct answer, you know, to most questions. Most questions. I mean, and you can raise just about any international situation that's occurred, and that will generally be the correct answer. And why is this true? Because you're dealing essentially with a white supremacist government. You're dealing with a government which is white supremacist to the core. It was created by white supremacists. It's got a White House. I mean, they tell you, the writing's on the wall, you know. A white man in a White House with a white Senate, right? With all the important people, white folks. They have a couple of Negroes running around every time again, like Colin, Buffalo Head Powell, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, here's a guy who basically, he's tough. He comes out, all right, we're going to cut him off and kill him, right? You know. Now, if the regular brother would have said something like that in the street out here in Chicago, they'd be ready to put him in jail the rest of his life, right? But as long as he's talking about killing somebody else for white people, then it's okay. I call him Buffalo Head because really what he is a lineal descendant of the Buffalo Soldiers. This is what he is. You have to understand that the Buffalo Soldiers are black men. I'm squeezing a little bit of history in here because this history helps us learn. The Buffalo Soldiers are black men who actually struggled in the Civil War as troops. They came into war because it was their understanding, or most black people's understanding back that time, that their participation in the Civil War would help win black people freedom, particularly freedom from slavery. They were also promised 40 acres in the Mule. They were also promised liberated territory and reparations. And so, in fact, in some instances, they had that. South Carolina, Seattle, and various other places, they actually established independent black communities. But after the black soldiers helped win the war and actually were primarily responsible for winning the war, then the old slick cracker pulled the number on them, all right? First of all, because blacks were rebelling in the South, in South Carolina and Mississippi, demanding land and actually moving to take it over land, they moved the black soldiers out of the South over into the West in order to fight, guess who? The Red Nations, right? And these became your so-called Buffalo Soldiers. And see, if you're not careful about history, they'll have you proud of a Buffalo Soldier because he could ride a horse fast and shoot straight, right? And so this makes him a hero. It's not what you do that makes you a hero. It's who you do it for that makes you a hero. Now, some of the Buffalo Soldiers had better sense than to shoot at the Native Americans, and they shot at the Americans, you know? And so this was cool, you know, and so they were heroes. But the other ones weren't. They basically helped, and at the same moment that they were doing this now, the Ku Klux Klan and other white terrorist groups were down there lynching people in Mississippi, killing people in South Carolina, and taking over the government structures, you know, from our folks. So this is why we give Colin Powell his respectful name, Colin Buffalo Head Powell. You know. And in fact, he's proud of that. I'm telling you, because they got up and gave us, he gave a speech about the Buffalo Soldiers not long ago. You know, his true lineal ancestors. This is what he was talking about. Okay, no problem. No problem. This is I want to congratulate the brother because he's doing a job on this video here, and unlike a lot of people who just take the video and don't tell you what to do, he's told me what to do down to the final detail. He even wrote my speech for me. No, he didn't do that, but he's very, I think he's very efficient, and I think we should give him a round of applause.
at home. See if he can get. He had arrows. He can get some videos. Straight up. How you been doing, Brother Ron? That's my boy D right here. It's Trinity. Tried to bring as many as I could.
I guess I should make a couple of announcements then. Malcolm X College is having a problem, and some of the other black city colleges are having problems with the administration threatening to cut off some of their funding or whatever. So they're going to have a meeting at the Center for Inner City Studies, April 29th at 7 p.m. Community forum, in which we're going to try to develop some type of strategies to fight that effort. The other thing is that it's 7 o'clock Monday, April 29th. The other event is there's going to be a march against racism in Bridgeport, Mayor Daley's neighborhood, against police brutality and racist attacks. Next Saturday, step off at noon, meet at 35th and Low for the march and rally.
So what's down for that?
It's being sponsored by ACT UP Chicago, American Friends Service Committee, Chicago Conference of Black Lawyers, CBUC, Committee to End Marion Lockdown, John Brown Anti-Klan Committee, National Lawyers Guild, Leonard Barrister Memorial and Defense Committee, and other organizations. And we need a chapter of the New African People's Organization so we can sponsor. What is this? Munir Muhammad is the business manager for Crow. And next Saturday, May 4th, 1991, he's going to have a program. It's going to be here, okay, at 7 p.m. Crow. Okay, the Coalition for the Remembrance of Elijah will have a program here May 4th, 1991. We're going to do Shahrazad?
Yeah.
We're going to have a book signing with Shahrazad Ali May 10th. What time? 6 o'clock.
Better bolt the doors.
What's up, man?
Odessa?
Yeah,
Odessa is an African fighting arts instructor. The brother's going to be here next Saturday. What time? 7 o'clock. He's going to be doing a demonstration and a lecture / lecture. Brother's art is deep. Check it out. Odessa Mandarasi.
what's the art?
It's African fighting arts. He,
Long Suma 2 fighting arts.
yeah, he comes from West Africa.
Derived of Caporetto and a few other arts. She's developed herself. He's a master teacher. He's got certificates in several different martial arts. Brother, check him out. Self-defense is clear.
We got more flyers of the march up front and the circular thing. We got a couple of flyers about the meeting at the Center for Inner City Studies.
Fight like this. Day, be lifting 10,000 pounds of weights and fight like this.
Are we still taking?
We didn't lose, brother, did we?
No.
somebody would drop me off.
Friday, May 24th at 6 p.m. at Kennedy King College, the National Black United Front and the Worldwide Oneness Church will be presenting an African Liberation Day Symposium featuring Bob Law, syndicated New York City Night Talk radio host, Conrad World, Reverend Nelson Brown. Entertainment will be by D. Alexander and the Worldwide Wonders Church Choir. The topic will be the origin and history of African Liberation Day and the continued motion toward the liberation of African people worldwide. This year's ALD will be Saturday, May 25th. Assembly at Jackson and Austin at 10 p.m. Step off at 11:30. We'll have a rally. 10 a.m. Rally in Garfield Park at 1 a.m.
Oh, I thought you said that's my horn right there in the crowd.
You want to do some comments?
Oh yeah, we don't have our slide together, but the Coalition to Commemorate Malcolm X will be having our second annual conference in commemoration of the birth of Malcolm X, our shining black prince. We'll have it May 17th through 19th at Malcolm X College. The conference theme this year will be Unity in the Community. And we're expecting to have Dr. Betty Shabazz kick us off that Friday evening. So, everybody come out. For more information, call 968-1243. Anybody have any other announcements?
Good land, Brother Hannibal.
Good land, Brother Chokwe. We're in the war.
Right on. So the Malcolm X program is coming up is
17th through 18th.
and that's the sequel to what you did last year.
Yes, sir.
You won't. Try it again. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, brother. It's me. How you doing?
All right.
Okay. We gotta begin again. As I was saying, is that at this particular point in the struggle, is that the system has basically adapted to some of its challenges. It's kind of like that picture that you saw on TV or the movie, what was it called, The Empire Strikes Back. You have to understand that this empire was shaken in the 60s. It was shaken on an international level in its defeat in Vietnam. It was shaken internally as the Black Liberation Movement leveled Detroit, leveled Newark, leveled various other cities, and as they were put in a position where they had no choice but to at least get rid of the discriminatory laws which were on the book. They had no choice to do that rather than because the alternative was to face the wrath of angry black masses, not only internally, but to face the wrath of a world which basically they had to explain to African countries which were becoming increasingly independent while they were still treating Africans here in America in the overtly racist fascists they were. But after being shaken in those ways, now it's important to note that there's a difference between being shaken and being beaten, right? There's a difference between being shaken and being destroyed. There's a difference between being shaken and being dismantled. The problem with our movement in the 60s, from a historical perspective, is not what it did, but what it didn't do. You understand? The problem was not that it didn't do a lot of the right things, but it didn't do a lot of those things long enough, thoroughly enough, completely enough, until we accomplished the whole problem. That essentially was the problem of our movement in the 60s. Our movement in the 60s took the route that most revolutionary movements take. They first start off as demands for democratic rights. They want the people to just be treated justly. That's why the people are interested and involved. So although many of us revolutionary nationalists and nationalists were dismayed at the King demonstrations because they had people walking down the street and getting hit in the head and calling for nonviolence, that was a necessary stage to introduce us to the next level. If King wouldn't have done what he did, then we wouldn't have been able to hear what Malcolm had to say. If King wouldn't have done what he did, then the real power that went into the creation of the Black Liberation Movement, the Black Power Movement, would have never occurred. Because the wisdom that we had at that time around nationalism, around our identity as a people, around the fact that we were a nation and that we were Africans and we came from Africa was nothing new. We had had that wisdom for centuries. The problem is that the wisdom in some instances had gotten divorced from the action. The activists were those people in Mississippi and in South Carolina and Alabama and the civil rights demonstrators who were challenging the system where it stood, who were not trying to duck the system but who were confronting the system. The wise people in many cases had sometimes put handcuffs on themselves. And Malcolm understood that. And that's why the contradiction arose between Malcolm and the Nation of Islam. Because Malcolm understood the need for action. And so what he said that he was going to do is infuse the nationalist movement into the civil rights movement and elevate it to a human rights movement. And that's the course of revolution. You move from a struggle merely for democratic rights to a struggle for power. Because you understand that the only way you're going to get the democratic rights is in fact to get power. You understand that as long as you rely upon people who control you, as long as you rely upon people who control you to do you right, then you'll never get done right. And even if you are done right for one day, for one moment, for 1 second, if they're still in control, then they can make another decision the next day. And so what had happened is that in the 60s, the system had been shaken, but it had not been destroyed. We had young groups, young movement, young people. We had suffered from a long time of what I would call discontinuity, a lack of connection from some of the movements of the past. We didn't fully understand, share, and devour the wisdom of Marcus Garvey. We didn't totally, and in fact, what we did is at times some of our elder statesmen who were around, rather than embracing this movement that were on the scene as they should have, many times because the movement didn't encompass all that they felt that it should have had, or because of personal problems with people, they actually estranged themselves from the movement. The Nation of Islam, in my view, and Elijah Muhammad should have embraced the Panthers, not condemned the Panthers. And that was part of our problem. So what we had on the scene and what we had at that situation was a lack of ability to benefit from the wisdom of our past. And so we were vulnerable. And we were vulnerable to the counterintelligence program. We were vulnerable to every dirty, low-down trick that the government was going to put on us. We were vulnerable to a trick where they basically froze certain people mentally where they were. They froze certain people in a civil rights time warp. You understand what I'm saying? Where they could not understand that it was more than going and sitting on some toilet next to some white person, right? That it was more than getting the right to go to a restaurant, that you didn't have money to get into in the first place, right? And that they didn't understand that the civil rights movement, if it did not logically lead to a black power movement and a black liberation struggle, would only and could only turn out to be a movement for the petty bourgeois, the bourgeois blacks, those who had enough money to do the stuff that you were getting the right to do in the first place, those who had the ability to get it, the few that would have the ability to get into law schools or the medical schools. And now we've come to turn out that it really wasn't no gold mine for them, because they putting them out now too. In fact, those who become lawyers and doctors, a lot of them are as poor as you are, I'm telling you. They walk around in 3 pieces and briefcases and go home and don't have no food to cover it. Some of them are 2 paychecks away from poverty. Yeah, just telling you. And so, like, the reality is that they tricked everybody. And so what we came up with is that when we talk about the empire striking back, is that they responded to the situation that had been put upon them by basically striking back at our movement. And they strike back in a very vicious kind of way. And the veneer of oppression now is now, the point I'm making, a black veneer. So you have to recognize it. And you have to oppose it every bit as strong and as vehement as you did when the white man was out there whooping your head. It doesn't make any difference whether the guy who whooped the brother's head out in Los Angeles would have been white or black. Your response to him should have been the same, because their boss is the same. The person they're working for is the same. It all goes back to the white supremacist core. This is what we're saying. There is no black leadership of a police department anywhere, really. Anywhere, really. Probably the most progressive form of city government that we have seen, or in terms of a leader, and I'm talking about objectively because I know all of you might have problems here too, but probably the most progressive mayoral leader that has been elected for black people in our lifetime probably was Harold Washington. But at the same time, there were still problems right here in the city of Chicago. Why was there problems in the city of Chicago? Because first of all, even if Harold Washington was the epitome, if he was the epitome of a great mayor, he don't control Chicago because he didn't control the economics of Chicago. And if you don't control the economics of a situation, there's no way you can really control the politics of the situation. Secondly, he didn't really even control all the politics, because the city is nothing but a subdivision of the state. And the state is run by a lot of white racist crackers in whatever they call it, Illinois, Springfield, Illinois. That's what it is. This is who the state is run by. And the state is controlled by a federal system, which is run nothing but by the descendants, the lineal descendants of Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and all the rest of those slaveholders, you know? And then I see people run around here today celebrating the American flag. And I get so nauseated with that thing. I mean, I ask myself, what is it that they see in that old red, black, and red, well, excuse me, that old white, what is it, white, red, white, and blue. See, I'm so into the bright black and green, I can't even get the other one out of my mouth, right? But I mean, you know, but that old rag, I mean, what is it they see in it? And then, I mean, you know, we opposed the Ku Klux Klan back in April of last year. We fronted them on the street and sent them running. And you know what they had in their hand? They had the American flag. Now, how you gonna carry the same flag that the Ku Klux Klan is carrying? In fact, in Johnny, Mississippi, they were criticizing the state because, you know, the state of Mississippi, the government, the white government, still uses the rebel flag. I'm telling you. These crackers got the audacity to still be flying the rebel flag. And they say the South lost the war. I'm telling you. And so like, they got these flags, they carry them together. The red, white, and blue over here, and the rebel red, white, and blue, because it's red, white, and blue too, right over here. And so they carry these 2 flags, and so a lot of brothers and sisters in Mississippi, the NAACP, said that they didn't want them to use the rebel flag no more. And so I said, well, that's cool, but while you're at it, take down the other one too, you know what I'm saying? I mean, what does it represent? We have to ask ourselves, where has it flown before? I mean, it flew when they dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Do you want to be responsible for that? They flew on the ships that carried you to slavery in the latter parts of the slave trade. They flew on the plantations where you were in slavery. In fact, the old northern New Englanders are the ones that brought you over here in slavery. This is the ones that brought you in slavery and delivered you into the hands of the southern plantation owners. And so the flag, you know, and this is why, like, you notice that in these so-called pro-war rallies, and you know, this is an interesting concept here. These crackers were given pro-war rallies for peace. You understand? They were pro-war for peace. You know, that just goes to tell you that when people go crazy, you can tell them anything. You know, they can tell you that. I mean, how they go pro-war, okay, so I mean, but anyway, this is the crackers were doing. But the biggest ones were right down there in the same places where they are the most overtly, come out with this white supremacy and this white racism. David Duke supported types. You know what I'm talking about. I mean, anywhere, like in Mississippi, man, these crackers ain't came out so much as they did for that rally in years, right? I mean, they can't even get crackers to come to football games right in Mississippi no more. Jackson State pulls more people than University of Mississippi and Mississippi State because they ain't no good. That's the main reason, But I mean, they can't even get crackers to come out for football games. But they came out 100,000 strong in Mississippi. And you realize that Mississippi don't have as many people in the state as you do in the metropolitan Chicago, which means that they got far less white people than you got here. Far less white people because black folks constitute over 50% of the population down there, really. The truth be told. But 100,000 crowds, they're waving these red, white, and blue flags, and things of this nature. And so how, and this is the reinstitution of white supremacy in a big way. And so we have to understand it, and we have to recognize it as we see it. On the international level, as well as on the local level. What we have to do is adopt a program. We've got to adopt an agenda. We have to adopt a strategy which will address itself to the various problems that we are confronted with now. We've got to adopt a clear strategy which addresses itself to the various issues. One of the reasons why we are able to be put in a situation where we are controlled by non-leadership is because of the fragmentation of our people and the fragmentation of our movement. And so we need a people's unification movement. We need a movement where we understand that the purpose of the movement is to unify the people. Now, I didn't say just unify the big shots. I said unify the people. First of all, if your effort is just to unify the people who are allegedly supposed to be leaders, you will wind up getting a lot of people in there who shouldn't be in there in the first place, I'm telling you. But secondly, you'll wind up getting imposters there. People who don't represent nobody. In fact, you don't have a right to be at the table unless you represent somebody. You understand what I'm saying? So what we have to do is, like a lot of brothers and sisters, especially young brothers and sisters, rightfully today say, look at here, y'all been around here all this time and y'all can't get together, right? But look, you part of us. You understand what I'm saying? You go out, you can go out, if you can't unify nobody else, unify your classroom, where you go to school. Unify your block where you live. Unify your friends. Y'all can't even get together in a basketball game. You're out there fighting and yelling at each other, right? We couldn't either. So but the reality is that this is what we got to do. We have to unify the masses. Unity has to be mass-based. So yes, we have to bring organizations together. But the greatest incentive for genuine organizations to come together is the unity of the people. Now, how do you build unity? You can't just walk next door and tell a guy, well, let's be together because we black. He ain't going to do it, and she ain't going to do it. What we have to do is struggle. Unity is a struggle. Unity is a struggle, and the struggle helps build unity. What we need is a concrete, revolutionary unification program. We call it a Malcolm X grassroots movement. You can call it what you want. But what we need is a program which talks about self-defense, self-respect, and self-determination. If you can't get to that, then you really aren't interested in the unification of black folks. This is what we need. Self-respect, self-defense, and self-determination. And what you have to do is to sit down and institute the program wherever you see the need to institute it. So if you are in a school which basically is dealing with backwards, white, Caucasian, reactionary, misstated history, it is your absolute responsibility to get a hold of some information, first of all, in your head, get a hold of an Afrocentric educational process, and go down there and demand it at the school, and if they don't want to give it to you at the school, organize the people to turn the school out. This is what it is. It's better not to go to school than to go to school and learn how to be a fool. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, why go backwards in life? This is what I'm trying to figure out. I mean, we have people that go all the way through law school and are dumber when they get through than they were when they started out. Kindergarten. I mean, some people got basic knowledge when they're in kindergarten. I mean, they studied ants. They know the ants are trying to take control of some land, right? But once you get through law school, you don't think you're entitled to nothing, right? Except kissing white folks behind. This is basically what it is. And so we have to straighten people out. I'm telling you. It's necessary. And so, like, we say we need a Malcolm X grassroots movement. Now, I think that the program here around Malcolm X Day is a great program. You need to get involved with it. Brother Hannibal's program. Or not, it's not Brother Hannibal's program, but Brother Hannibal's the person I know that's one of the people that sponsor it. But it's important to go out there. Malcolm's name is important. Malcolm's name at this point in history, I think, can help build this unity, at least amongst the ranks of a large percentage of our youth population, because the youth have a great respect for Malcolm. They see him as an uncompromising, righteous, stand up, straight up, no step back individual. It's important that we have such a symbol. The Sandinistas had a symbol like that in Nicaragua. They call him Sandino. And even 50 years after he died, they used the image of that man in order to build a movement that set imperialism on its head in Nicaragua. And is going to set imperialism further on its head in the future. And so the situation is we need that kind of symbol. Our children need that kind of symbol. And so we should use it. Now that doesn't mean that Malcolm X grassroots movement will complete the process, because we got people who basically don't understand Malcolm or who are against Malcolm for one reason or another. So we're not going to get caught up over an individual or a personality. But the point is that the Malcolm movement can unite a large segment of our movement. And for those Muslims that it doesn't bring in, or for those Christians that it doesn't bring in, then what we do is look for a national self-determination movement, even greater than that we'll bring them into the fold too. Because the question is self-respect, self-defense, and self-determination. If we can achieve all those things, then we have achieved what we needed to achieve. The self-determination movement must take place at a grassroots level. It has to take place around police brutality situations like we see out there in California. Sometimes we get so revolutionary that we don't do nothing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a protester is not revolutionary. I can't do it. I got to go back and read, some more books. I mean, that's cool. But what are you reading about if you ain't doing nothing? You know what I'm saying? I mean, what could they possibly be telling you in the books if you coming out still ain't doing nothing? You need an interpreter, somebody to help interpret that book for you. I mean, really. There's no book worth its salt that's going to tell you not to do nothing. I mean, and so like what I'm saying is this is what we have to do. Yes, we have to read. It's a question of theory and practice. Theory and practice. Theory and practice. The youth generation has an obligation to get away from some of the foolishness that we got caught up in. Your obligation is to make sure that you don't allow the enemy to divide things which go together. Of course theory and practice go together. I mean, what do you look like learning how to cook a pie and don't never cook one? You know what I'm saying? Just stand around reading the book. You know what I'm saying? I mean, what do you look like cooking a pie and ain't read how to do it, don't know how to do it, You're killing some people out there. And so obviously you got to have one in order to have the other. And so theory and practice go together. Don't let nobody talk you out of it. You got to study and you got to work. But basically, generally speaking, in this movement, we have to deal with educating, organizing, mobilizing, and agitating. Agitation is the way to stir up the pot, so to speak. When we talk about agitation, you're not creating anything that doesn't exist, but you're exposing what exists. You are bringing the people into a political experience, which will essentially give them the ability to seek their aspirations in more politically concrete ways. You are introducing the people to a political experience that will put them in a prolonged confrontation with their enemy. You will introduce a person who has a landlord-tenant problem to a struggle which will elevate their understanding from the fact that it is not just the landlord who is the problem, but it's the government that's behind the landlord, it's the laws behind the landlord, it's the economic system behind the landlord, and so it's regular old American imperialistic racist system that they're up against. And so this is the kinds of struggles that we have to engage in our educational arena and all over. I think that that's why the Grambling situation is important. I think that that's why when we talk about demonstrating against racism, and particularly in situations where we as African people begin to organize, and against police brutality, all of those things are important. You don't get too advanced to deal with these small, quote-unquote, small issues, because it's the small issues that will bring people to larger understanding. And remember, it's not just about you. You can't win no revolution by yourself. So you've got to get out there and do the things necessary to introduce to people who haven't heard this lecture before, who have never heard a lecture like this before, right? And so you've got to do the things necessary to introduce them to the struggle. We need an empowerment campaign. Anything we do has to be geared to taking control, taking power. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing sinful about having a little control over your own life. You know what I'm saying? It's got to be about taking control. And so if you don't think you can, if it's not about taking control, then you shouldn't do it. I mean, this is true at our jobs, where we work. In many instances, we're in situations where we're being discriminated against. In the South, they got a pitiful situation. I mean, the situation is like, you know, 75% of the working force in Mississippi is clearly black. You know, it's not like, I know like in Michigan where I was born, you know, when you go through, you see workforces on the street and stuff, they're always white people, you know, because basically they won't let the brothers have a job. In Mississippi, everybody working is black. You know, everybody working is black. I guess white folks never really learned how to work. That's the only thing I can figure out. But they all black. Now, they always got a white supervisor, but the people doing the work, even if you go to a high-class, quote-unquote, cracker restaurant, you know who's back in the back cooking? Black folks in Mississippi. I'm telling you, this is who's cooking. So the workforce is just about all black. But the problem is that they have no rights. No rights. No right to unionize, no right to struggle. In those kinds of situations, we have to organize our people to fight against oppression. We need to support workers, caucuses. We need to make them intelligent, too. We need to have them following black Afrocentric theory, which is going to help us lead independent. Some of the problems is that some of our workers' organizations have been following stuff which basically doesn't really address our specific needs or doesn't motivate our communities, right? They've been following this white man or that white man or this white theory or that white theory. And any theory that is worth its salt will tell you that you have to take a theory and adapt it to your particular situation in order to win your empowerment. So an empowerment campaign is important. Organization of our defense capacity are what we might call a military campaign. Now, you know, it's interesting how things will affect you. I just recently had to go before the State Bar of Mississippi, and they basically were saying that I was unfit character, and so they didn't want to let me in the bar. They didn't want to let me practice law there, although I've been practicing like 15 years in Michigan. And they said it's because I believed in the violent overthrow of the United States government, you know. And so, you know, so I think every time I read this about this organized, this military campaign, I think about this, right? And the reality is that I guess it's like this. They can disbar me in the morning, but I'm going to tell you the truth tonight. You understand what I'm saying? The reality is that we have to have a defense campaign. What do we look without a defense campaign? I mean, we can't defend ourselves. We aren't organized to defend ourselves now. So what we do is we invite the very people into the community to defend us who have brought us the problem in the first place. The police are the drug sellers. They're the drug dealers in many instances. They're the conveyors of drugs and those who work with the conveyors of drugs. And if they aren't, their bosses surely are, right? And so why would we invite them in to our communities to defend us from anything? The problem is because we don't have any defense. And they don't inspire us to. And so we have to train ourselves physically. When the brother talked about the martial arts class and other forms of defensive arts, we have to be on top of them. You should have a security group in anything you do. If you got a T club, you should have the T club security group. I'm telling you. Whatever you do, you should form a security group, and you should train. You should know how to defend yourself. And so you can't have any reason for allowing people to prey upon you, regardless of who they are. Now the situation is that there are, in addition to what we call the need for a mass people's defense movement, there's also a need for a specialized defense force. We call it what we call the Black Liberation Army. And if you're serious about winning, you got to have one. You call it what you want, but you got to have one. You don't know anybody that's ever won that didn't have somebody that was ready to throw down around any way they had to in order to win. The United States certainly didn't get their freedom by talking to people about it, you know. And nowhere is this true in the world. And so you have to have a revolutionary army, underground people. What I call a peekaboo force. Now you see me, now you don't, right? Now, you know, this is a reality. This is what we need. Now, I'm kind of like the doctor. I'm diagnosing this problem here and telling you what the disease is and telling you what you need, right? So I don't want you to get the impression that I am the underground, right? Okay. I mean, I don't want you to get that, and I'm saying that for the tape, right? Okay. but you know, because see, first of all, even if I was, you wouldn't know it, right? And I wouldn't say it. But this is an army which basically has to put teeth into our struggle. If you don't have no teeth, then protests become very, very difficult because you always get your butt kicked, you know what I'm saying? So what you have to have is somebody ready to make it, to impress them with the fact that they don't prey on the people like that. when there were, and there still are actually, these kind of forces around, it was a lot more difficult to sell drugs on the street. It was a lot more difficult to sell drugs when drug men had to look over their head and under the bed and worried about some panther breaking down the door, coming in to take the drugs out and flush them down the toilet stool. And then what they did is they claimed that they were cleaning up the streets. They put the panthers in jail, killed the panthers, and so these very corners that the panthers used to sell papers on, they sell drugs on those corners now, right? The very places that they helped close down created situations now where drugs are flourishing throughout our community. We have to essentially have a revolutionary force which is ready to take matters into our hands, Pan-Africanism is necessary. We have to have a revolutionary Pan-African policy, a revolutionary Pan-African policy. Right behind this flag is a map which has the states of Africa on it. Actually, this up here, it's interesting. You notice how they stop coloring Africa right here, and all of a sudden it becomes a different color. This is what they call the Middle East. It's not part of any continent. Now, I mean, that's strange, isn't it? I mean, the reason why they don't tell you it's a part of any continent, because the only continent it could possibly be part of is the continent that touches here, and the continent that touches way down here, and that's the continent of Africa. And so this place way up here, they done told those who've learned for years and years about Jesus Christ and about the Hebrews and about, but they don't want us to know that that was us, right? Okay, and so the reality is that they take the part of the world where those events occurred at away from Africa. But this is all of Africa, and there must be a united Africa. There must be a united Africa. Africa must unite because Africa is one of the richest, wealthiest areas in the world. It is the motherland, it is our motherland, it is central to the efforts not only for our freedom, but actually central to the efforts of the freedom of the world. I will just pause here to say I'm talking about revolutionary Pan-Africanism. I'm not talking about handkerchief heads, so-called Pan-Africanism. I'm not talking about leaders who some of them who helped their lineal ancestors help sell us over here, and they're still selling their people out today. Some of them, Unfortunately, most of the governments of Africa are either controlled by the United States or controlled by the Soviet Union before the Soviet Union got out of the game of controlling people. Right now, they're going through a withdrawal, so to speak. But before they got it, they were controlled by one or the other. So what it means, that's not to downplay the revolutions which occurred to put these people in power because those were necessary. But it just shows you that life is a continuing struggle. And any time you stop, then you get set back. Now we should know that because our ancestors are the ones that come up with the concept. The whole thing about the unity of opposites and there being...
Sorry, it's about to go out.
Okay. About there being negative forces and positive forces. And we have to interact and we have to interact and struggle in life in order to move from one stage of life to the next. And so what that means is that the African struggles which brought those governments to power were positive. But what happened because of an absence of struggle during a period of time, because of a compromise with imperialist forces, most of those countries now are controlled by economic policies which are decided in Washington, D.C. This is the reality. Most of those countries are controlled by policies which are decided by the International Monetary Fund. Many of those countries, like Nigeria, repress their own youth. They repress their own youth. And the countries, even countries that don't want to be repressive, many times are repressive because they haven't gotten control of their own economics. That means that there's another African revolution on the horizon. And this revolution is going to sweep the whole continent of Africa. This revolution is going to do away with those who are working for someone else and deliver Africa into the hands of those who work for us. This revolution ain't going to worry about paying the United States or the International Monetary Fund back a dime. Because this revolution will have enough sense to know that anything that we've gotten from them, they owed it to us in the first place. You understand what I'm saying? It's all a reparations debt. And they owe us a great deal. So Pan-Africanism, but Pan-Africanism doesn't stop with those borders. Pan-Africanism is a concept which embraces you right here where you are, in the city of Chicago. It also embraces us around the country. And it embraces us around the world. Pan-Africanism is a concept that says, well, African people, wherever they are, have to be free. Africa is a focus of it because Africa it was the central land base where we came from. But what that means is we also must understand the need for liberation movements where we are. liberation movements where we are. We must understand the need to fight a new African liberation movement. The best thing you can do to contribute to the struggle in Africa is either to go there or to create a fight right here, which will basically help to destroy the same imperialist empire which is responsible for the oppression in Africa in the first place. You cannot just help the African Revolution by just thinking about it, or just praying about it, or even just giving a few dimes to it. I mean, you know, it helps to give money to it, but you have to be a revolutionary. And so what we have to do is struggle for self-control right here. And right now, right in what we call New Africa, in the South, there's a black belt. Thousands of acres, thousands of miles of land, inhabited primarily and predominantly by black folks. There's some 40-county area in Mississippi, going up and down the western coast of Mississippi, where blacks outnumber whites something like 8-to-1, where blacks are something like 90% of the workers and something like 90% of the consumers, where the culture is the blues, where the culture is the African spiritual, where the culture is the culture that we've made. It's the only culture that is there. It is New Africa. It is Africa. It's where we have large stretches of land which sit right at the doorstep of the Caribbean community, and nations like Barbados and the Bahamas and other black nations, in Haiti, which sits right along, almost right up and a little bit to the side of the Nicaraguan East Coast, and the Belize, which are black territories where Africans live, which sits right above Southern America, where Brazil has some 60 million people, and which sits right across from Africa on the 30th parallel. It is not New York across from Africa. It is the South. It is Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana, which is the South across from Africa. That is a critical territory. It is important that we understand that the need to wage struggle for land right here in America, to take control of land, not only to help to liberate that land from the American empire, but to support the struggle of the Puerto Ricans to free Puerto Rico, to support the struggle of the Caribbean communities to free their countries, to support the struggle of the Mexicanos to free the upper part of Mexico, to support the struggle of the Native Americans to help free the territories which they seek to free at this time, even given the limited numbers which have been left of Native Americans in the United States, although there are large percentages of Native Americans like in Southern America and various other places. We must understand the need for what I would call anti-imperialist action, which is to take apart this empire. You cannot solve American imperialism by walking away from the place where American imperialism was born. American imperialism was born right here. It was born when they jumped off ships, stealing the Native Americans' land, when they put us into slavery here, and when they took the whole upper part of Mexico. That was the birthplace of it. And from there, then they became the surrogates and replaced British imperialism in Africa. They became the surrogates and replaced imperialism around the world. We have to destroy the creature where it started. We need unity between liberation movements around the world. That has to be part of our plan. We need to link up with other African liberation movements in order to formulate Pan-African liberation strategy. We also need to link up with genuine liberation movements on this continent. When I say link up, we need to form anti-imperialist alliances with Native American groups and with Puerto Ricans and Mexicano groups. Not to have them come into our communities to win freedom for us, or to have us go into their communities and win freedom to them, but to have coordinated struggles which realize, as we struggle to take self-control over different institutions in Chicago, as we struggle to take control over land in the Deep South, which supports the Mexicano struggle to take the Southwest back from the United States of America. The population ratio is beginning to support us. Our numbers are increasing. All over the continent, our numbers are increasing. The white man is becoming the minority in a lot of situations. Down in Mississippi, the white man is already the minority, right? If you're talking about a non-self-governing territory, you've got it there right already. The same thing is true in LA and in various parts of what we call northern Mexico. So what has to happen is we have to support these righteous struggles. We need economic action. Economic action is absolutely essential. Economic action means that what you have to do is begin to lay the foundation for a future economy, and at the same time create actions which help to destabilize the economic economy which is basically controlling you. It means boycotts and strikes in order to destabilize their economy. And it means the building of people's institutions, people's cooperatives, and all kinds of businesses which will help to build the future of a new African economy linked with an African economy around this world. This is what economic action is important. It is very important to understand that economic action is tied to revolutionary action. You cannot separate the two. Anybody that's willing to build a store and not willing to support the revolution, you need to forget about it. You need to boycott them just like you boycott the white man, because it ain't going nowhere. It don't mean nothing. I'm telling you. And the reality is that just for some brother and sister to take it upon themselves to get a little more richer by opening a store doesn't make us all better off. It only makes us better off if there's a contribution back to the movement. We have to start taking hard positions now in our movement because these are hard times. We need to deal with Afrocentric socialism. We have to deal with the notion that capitalism doesn't work. It's destructive. It's destroyed us. We were the capital that they brought here to build this thing. We have to move away from that. We have to denounce it. You can't get fooled and tricked out of space because they say, well, look at the Soviets. They've fallen apart. They were dealing with socialism. First of all, that's questionable anyway, whether they were really dealing with real socialism. Secondly, they were clearly racist. And thirdly, of course the United States system is more stable than the Soviet system and more stable than everybody else in the world. If you had 200 years of free labor behind you, you'd be pretty tough too, It don't make no difference what you call your system. You can call yourself a fiefdom if you want to. If you got 200 years of free labor, you got a pretty good corner on the market, right? And so the reality is that socialism does work. It works for people. I've been to places where I've seen it work. I've been to Cuba. It works in Cuba. I'm not satisfied with everything happening in Cuba, but I can tell you that the economic system works, right? The reality is that you don't have the kind of crime that you got here. You can walk the streets, you can leave a briefcase full of money and come back and it'll still be sitting there. Now you try that here in Chicago, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, the economic system works. They don't have drugs for the most part. Their biggest problem, and that's just centered around the places usually where the Americans come to visit the hotels. I'm telling you. And so, like, the reality is that you actually have kids who play on playgrounds, happy kids. You saw happy kids, you know what I'm saying? I mean, happy kids who believe in their country, who believe in their revolution, who believe in their cause, And so, like, I think that, you have to look at the situation is that any system which says that the people will control the economy, this is the system that you want to be part of. And you have to make it work. We need full participation of our women in our movement and full rights of our women in our nation and in our liberation movement. I'm not going to be here when Sister comes for the signing of the book. Let me say this. That's a controversy we get into a little later. But let me say this. You have to be careful. And you see, the problem is that sometimes we have uneducated or undereducated people trying to speak on things that they know just a little bit about. Now, I will start with Sherazade. I heard her on radio, and I don't know what she's saying now. I haven't seen her and heard her in a long time. But when she first started out, she was talking about how we had been duped by the white system into such a way as that the men were allowing the women to be leaders, and they really should be submissive to the men because that's the way it was in Africa. I bet you wouldn't tell Queen Candace that, right? Okay. I bet you wouldn't tell Queen Nzinga that, I bet you wouldn't tell Cleopatra that, or you wouldn't have your head, you know what I'm saying? The reality is that, of course, there were cultural variations in Africa, just like there's cultural variations in various other parts of the world and other things. But the reality is that Africans respected their women. Under any kind of system, they respected women. Women were not weak people, they were strong people. Women were leaders in many parts of Africa. There were some kingdoms in Africa where women were not leaders, and where it was predominantly a role which men had. But there were places where the women were the leaders and the men were not leaders in Africa. So the reality is that we have to understand, especially our African tradition gives us nothing that says that we should keep our movement, our women submissive. That's a misnomer. And secondly, we have to look at our situation today. Even if your African tradition did tell you that, you'd be a fool if you didn't throw it out today. I mean, what do you look like trying to fight with one hand behind your back? You know what I'm saying? We need every soul we can get on the battlefield. We can't excuse nobody because of sex. I mean, we have to deal with people's abilities as they are to create what we need. And that means also that we need men to participate in child rearing in terms of the development of children. That's one of the problems with some of our young men now. They don't have enough example from the men. They don't have enough supervision from the men. The men are never there. They go through whole lives. They don't have a father in the home. They don't have men teaching them at school. They don't, it used to be, we used to go to the playground, and we used to have wrecks. We used to call them the wrecks. And we'd go out there and play baseball, or, you know, there'd be a big muscular looking brother out there, you know, hitting balls over the fence, you know, and stuff like that. Now you go to the playground, and the wreck is somewhere getting high on weed. You know, you don't even see him all the time, you know, him or her, whoever it is. But the reality is that we don't have those examples, and we have to deal with it. We have to deal with it in a serious way. But full participation of our women in the movement. Anti-imperialism, which I spoke on, and finally I would end with the notion that what we are talking about is revolutionary, we call it revolutionary New African nationalism, which is part of revolutionary Pan-Africanism worldwide. And it's not only revolutionary New African nationalism as it relates to us here, but it's revolutionary New African nationalism as it relates to African people all over the world. All over the world now, we are creating a new African reality. Nations which were old nations are combining into African nations which are larger nations. They are combining into African states which didn't exist before the colonial experience. And they will combine into larger conglomerates of United States of Africa which have never existed before, either before or after colonialism. The new African reality is the reality which calls for people's war. And if you take every one of the principles that I just laid out, and if you use the first letter of each of those, then what you have is the term people's war. And this is what we must fight as a people. We must fight the war. We cannot leave it upon anyone to do it totally for us. We all must have a part in it. We all must take part in it. We all must find our place in it. There's a place for all of us. There's more specific agendas for more specific times. But what I've shared with you today, hopefully, is a broad outline of what I call a strategy for independence, for self-defense, self-respect, and self-determination for African people in America. I leave you with this strategy to think about, to debate about, and to hopefully join us, the New African People's Organization and the Malcolm X Grassroots movement, in our struggle, in all of our struggle. When I say our, I talk about all of us, because we don't come from Mars or from Jupiter. Nobody sent us from anywhere else. We come from you. We come from your community. We are the same people who you grew up with. We are the same people who went to the same schools, who had the same problems, and who have fought the same crackers throughout these years. And so what we're saying is that it's necessary for us to now unite in the independence movement and to struggle for our freedom with all of our people here and around the world. Thank you very much, and free to land. Questions? Anybody that wants to ask questions, and anybody that wants to make comments can do so. Brother, thank you. Have your hand up there.
Yeah, brother, I'd like to say you gave a good speech, and I have a question for you. Okay, we speak of revolution, and know that a revolution can't be brought about without blood being shed. Okay, my question to you is, we talk about a revolution, and revolution bring about a radical change, bring about 360 degrees of change, but I say, but with what? With what? You gotta think about this. Revolution cannot be brought about without blood being shed. Okay, that's what Malcolm said. Okay, and I say with what? Because if we talking about a revolution, I gotta worry about my brother stabbing me in the back, and we both the victims of the same problem. What are we gonna do? Okay, because we gotta be prepared for this. Suppose this man, we gotta face reality. Suppose this man cut off our lights, our gas. He's in charge of everything. He's in control of everything. We gotta face reality. Look at what he did in Iraq, and in the Middle East, in Kuwait. He got all these weapons and these helicopters and stuff. Anybody see the movie Blue Steel? How a helicopter in the urban area, in the city area, that could just blow up buildings and infrared things and heat-seeking. This is a helicopter in the urban area. Or what I say, with what? Okay, we speak of a revolution, and dealing with people who might not know what a revolution is. At first, a revolution got to be brought about in yourself. You got to bring a radical change about yourself to be able to deal with a revolution. How are you going to deal with it? And some people don't know what it is. Suppose he cut the food off. You can't eat. Suppose he cut the lights off. He cut the lights off. What now? What are we going to do? What are we going to do right now? What are we going to do? This man is a man. He's not playing. He is not playing. We got Scud missiles and all this. What are we going to do? You talk about revolution, and what are we going to do right now? Okay.
basically said the elements of both. Number one, revolution is a complete change. And number two, revolution normally involves some form of bloodshed. And bloodshed is not just in terms of shedding blood in terms of getting shot with a bullet, but bloodshed means enduring all kinds of harsh conditions, just like you just mentioned. And the strategy of our revolution has to be, first of all, to educate our people, to educate the people about the real purpose of the revolution. The real purpose of the revolution is not just to engage in warfare or to bring armies against armies, but the purpose of revolution is to engage system against system. A new system, a new way of doing things, and a new type of people against people who've been basically corrupting and degenerating the earth. The kind of people that we have to be about the process of building and training and educating are the kind of people who create a martial culture. A martial culture is a culture of permanent resistance. Even if you turn the lights out, even if you turn the food off, the babies, when they come out the mama's womb, you know, you whisper into them. In fact, when they're in the mama's womb, the first thing you tell them is you explain to them the revolution. This is our land, we're entitled to it, we intend to take it. And so it's a perpetual revolution. It never stops. And so you can't kill the revolution because the revolution lives in all the people. Now I can talk about specific things to deal with many of the specific features that you talk about in terms of, you know, helicopters and all that kind of stuff. First of all, especially given your situation, they're not the only one that can bomb, right? Now that the Iraqis were in a different situation, they're over there 15,000 miles away and apparently can't even get a plane in this sky, you know, to get over here or to shoot a Scud missile straight for 200 miles. But the reality is that really all you got to do is walk down the street sometime and take care of some business and can cause them serious consequences in terms of their businesses, in terms of places which are very valuable to them. In other words, if they bomb, we have the capacity of bombing back. But that is not really what wins the revolution. The revolution, what is won, is the persistence, ready to say, regardless of what they do, you continue. First, is to paralyze their economic system. Revolution means that you're prepared to strike, to boycott, to close down the subway system in the city of New York. They can't solve that problem by killing all the blacks in New York because the reason that the blacks are in New York for a purpose. They're in New York to run the subway system. They're in New York to run the postal system. They're in New York to run the factory, or in the other places to run the factory. The same thing's true in Chicago and everywhere else. So the only way they can solve that kind of problem is to create for themselves new problems. And so I think that that's the kind of program we have to develop and the kind of attitude we have to develop. Let me say this. You know, we build the country already. We build this one, right? You know, Huey P. Newton used to say something. He used to say the spirit of the people is greater than the man's technology. There is no form of war that they've ever come up with that we haven't found a way to get around. They had bombs in Vietnam. They had all kinds of bombs, just boom and napalm and stuff like that. People who didn't have as much wherewithal as you got beat them. You know what I'm saying? They beat Iraq. They beat Iraq for several reasons. But what the critical question becomes now is not to despair and say we can't win. The critical question becomes to start figuring out how we can win. And the kinds of things that I can talk about in these rooms are the kinds of things I just got finished talking about. You are responsible for the transportation system. See, part of the problem is that when I say you have to use that you in a collective sense. You are responsible for the brother who drives the bus. You have to reach that brother. You are responsible for the brother who drives the subway train. You have to reach that brother. You are responsible for the sisters that work in all these restaurants and things of that nature. We have to reach them. They are part of us, and they suffer from the same thing we suffer from. And so if we're to confront the system, all of us have a part. And the quickest way to bring any system down is to paralyze the structures which keep that system up. People gonna die, but that ain't new because you died anyway. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you couldn't get any deader than you're getting already. I mean, you know, and so so like the thing is that you know, like you almost at the point of you ain't got nothing to lose, you know. And so like the thing is that yeah, some people gonna die because that's the way struggle is. But the reality is that we're already losing lives, and so what we have to do is stop the bleeding. I mean, we got to stop the bleeding by bringing the war to a successful conclusion. They said that the United States was the baddest country in the world. Yet, the Black Liberation Army in 1979 went into Clinton State Prison, took a sister out, and she's free as a bird today in Cuba. You know what I'm saying? They said that couldn't have been done, but they did it. You know what I'm saying? They say that the United States has got a sophisticated system for finding everybody doing anything. Yet the Black Liberation Army, according to the FBI, took over $6 million over an 8-year period, and they didn't know who was taking it, right? Sent money to Zimbabwe, sent money to day camps here, to all kinds, built a hospital in Harlem, detoxed thousands of drug addicts. And so the point is that I think if we adopt the mentality and the genius that we have, we find a way. And if we don't have all the answers now, then the point is to train the children so they will get the answers. And as far as backbiting and backstabbing and things of that nature is concerned, one of the reasons that we do it, brother, is because we haven't been struggling. See, like energy is energy. It's going to be used. If it's not used constructively, then it's going to be used destructively. So what that means is that because we haven't been moving in a forthright forward direction, struggling against the real enemy, then what we do is we struggle against each other. And that has a large part to do with it. You will actually find that less, quote-unquote, African on African crime or black on black crime actually occurs during periods of high points of movements than it actually occurs during periods when you don't have any movement going on at all. And that's one of the reasons why they deal with that. Oppression brings about either crime or revolution, and which is going to bring about one of them. So what we have to decide is which one it is. We can either go out and kill each other and commit a lot of crimes and destroy ourselves, or we can create a revolution, which will help to solve the crime problem forever. And so this is what I've said. And it's a part of it is a mind. It's an attitude. It's not all attitude, but there's science there to handle these problems. You know what I mean? If they did it, we can do it. In fact, we invented all the stuff that they're using anyway. I mean, God, they don't have nothing that they're using that we didn't invent at some point in time. Going back to mathematics and technology and law and medicine and all these things that they have now are extensions of those things. So we can deal with them. Somebody had
with respect to this other brother's question, for a price of a pair of Nike gym shoes, you can buy an electric gas generator if you're worried about them turning the lights out. Start thinking like that.
A lot of people already have them. Like in the South, a lot of people have it. Because first of all, they lights go out all the time anyway, because the lighting system is so bad. And that's probably a blessing, you know what I'm saying? Go ahead.
Yeah, Brother Chokwe, even Bishop Tutu is talking about reparations. I also would like to know about that head of state in Nigeria who brought up the question of reparations, not what the context was. But also, could you perhaps give us an update on what's happening with respect to reparations?
The Cobra movement.
Professor John Conyers, the relationship of his appeal to what we would see as reparations.
I think that the reparations movement may be the central, most important movement in the struggle for people's unification movement. Because the reparation movement implicates all of us. It implicates us not only in terms of the present, but the past and going into the future. It's a question that there can be no bad answers to if you insist upon it. I mean, it's how do they really say with a straight face that they don't owe us nothing? You see what I'm saying? And if they do say it, who except a fool really believes it? You know what I'm saying? And so, I think it's a central movement. And so, what is happening right now is that there's a group we have formed called the National Coalition for Reparations for Blacks for Reparations in America. This is a broad-based group, consisting of revolutionaries and non-revolutionaries, and just a broad base of people. And one of the actions that the group is doing is supporting the bill which John Conyers has put into Congress, and that's what he's talking about, Brother Dr. Thompson, is that there's a bill which he put into Congress calling for a research on the question of reparations, whether researching the damage which has been caused by the years of slavery and things of that nature. Now, the bill has its weak aspects, but it is a bill. It gives us something to work around, and it also really can be used very well in some situations, because one of the things that the bill is going to call for is hearings around the country. The bill, to answer your question right now, it got through committee, surprisingly, okay? So I think the next thing, they accepted it in committee, and I think, if I understand correctly, and I have to check with people in D.C. who are working with this, that now they're going to have to call for hearings around the country. So what we're going to have to do is prepare in different places, in Chicago and other places, is people prepared to testify, people prepared to come and demonstrate at the hearings, people prepared to raise the question of reparations when they come through. But that's what's happening on that. We've had several meetings to try to start talking about organizing people in cities, to deal with these here. The other thing is that you mentioned the brother in Nigeria. They have a meeting set up for June, and I'm not sure the exact date in June, but in Nigeria they're going to have a meeting to deal. This is the Organization of African States, or Organization of African Unity, okay, which is it has a committee which is situated to deal on the question of reparations, and they've invited, for the first time, they tell me it's the first time, they've invited Africans from this country to come and participate. So that shows you what kind of potential that issue has, is that it can unite. They could actually get us the kind of respect to be invited to sit down with the Africans in the Organization for African Unity. And so it's a very powerful issue. I think that we have to prepare a group to go over there. We need to really sit down and plan it well. And COBRA is moving in that direction. And for any forces that's moving in that direction here, you could let me know, and maybe we can hook up, and we can see if we can, correctly plan for that. Because it's going to be a very big thing, and I think it's important for us to be there. Let me say this, the reason why is because the reparation issue is very powerful, which means that there's going to be all kinds of efforts by the enemy to misguide. They will be trying to get the African nations to settle for reparations in terms of a couple of breaks on a few loans, you know what I'm saying? They will be trying to get us to settle for an educational program where we send 2 or 3 people to college, on scholarships, and other pitnesses, But we have to have an in-depth understanding that reparations means a total economic, political, and cultural settlement, Reparations is not just economic, because your injury wasn't just economic. Your injury was as cultural as it was economic, and as political as it was cultural or economic. Your injury started with the fact you were deprived of self-determination. It also goes into the fact that you've been robbed of your culture. Your culture has made millions and billions and trillions of dollars for this country, and at the same time, you haven't gotten the benefit of it. So I think that all those things have to be in the reparations demand. So we need to be present where places are talking about, and particularly where states are talking about the reparations demand, because states will tend to be more conservative than people who aren't states. I mean, what I'm saying, at least at this point in history, this is true, okay? Because states are impacted upon by economic considerations, and they're concerned about diplomatic relationships and all that kind of stuff. So we need to be there. Yeah.
So the turning to the information that you gave about reparation, it's not a set agenda already set to carry to these people, or if you wait, it sounds kind of weird to me to go and expect them to come with an agenda.
No, we should take our own agenda, but the agenda is in the process of being developed. But the agenda right now is to make the demand and to set up for a conference or a commission to come up with precisely what the demand should consist of. The agenda is not to say, because that has been a problem that we've had in the past, is that a lot of people have gone and on their own come up with, we need this amount of money or that amount of money, we want this, and it has not been something which has been sanctioned on a broad level. And so there's no reason why you have to come up with a dollar amount today or even in June. But what we have to do is come up with a program and a plan whereby we bring people together all over the world, get their view, and then register a demand. You know what I'm saying? So that's what the agenda is. I mean, the National Coalition of Blacks in American Reparations, that's essentially their position. Is that a commission, a huge commission of Africans in this country, has to be selected, which will in fact determine what the actual demand should be. All right. And we all have our own individual proposals of exactly what the reparations should be. I'm one of the authors of a book that has a long proposal in it, called Reparations Yes. But it's not just what I think or just what somebody else thinks. It's what all of us think that has to come.
The question of Afrocentricity is being hotly debated. And what is your position on how and what should the role of Afrocentricity be in public school education, and how should that struggle be raised?
I think that Afrocentricity should be used as the offensive weapon against white supremacy in schools. it seems to me, I think that we have now developed Afrocentristic programs, actual curriculum. And what we need to do is to use those, first of all, they need to be in schools. Our kids have to be educated about themselves. And here again, this is a clear, really a reparation statement in and of itself, is that in order to repair ourselves, I have to repair our minds. And I think that's part of what the brother here was getting into. We have to repair our minds and our spirits. And so Afrocentric education is absolutely critical to it. And so I think that we're entitled to it, we should demand it, and we should organize groups of people in any city, in any school where we are, to fight for it. Where we have parents who can go into PTAs, they should fight for it. We have educators who they should fight for it. Where we have children, they should be prepared to boycott and leave school about it, you know what I'm saying? But let me say this too, is that I see it as a constructive thing, but I see it as an ongoing struggle. I guess this is the point. Until we win, until we get control over the schools and really get control over ourselves as a national entity, then of course we will never get precisely the education that we need. But I think that sometimes the struggle itself can be an incentive to educate you a lot better than you would have been educated had you not launched the struggle. So I don't expect that schools controlled completely by white folks are going to concede to us the ability to teach revolution in the schools. An Afrocentric revolution, education, essentially has to teach revolution in the final analysis. Because that is the reality of Africans in this country. But I think that we can get major programs into schools, and I believe that the struggle itself will raise us all to a higher level of understanding and be one of the things which will help motivate our people to fight all over this country. So I think it's very extremely important that we push for those programs. It's one of the primary tools against white supremacy, which exists in all the schools, even in the black schools. White supremacy is in the black schools.
Well, in line with that, is there any, does NAPO have educational materials? Is it advocating certain?
Well, let me say this. We have we have developed a manhood and a womanhood course, which we've been fighting for in the Detroit public schools. Okay, and we have curriculum on that, which deals with basically the whole idea of, I think, somewhat similar to the whole thing about rites of passage, but it also deals very much with contemporary problems that you face. So we have materials that we developed along that line. We have actually, asked the Black United Front, which has developed an Afrocentric education, program, to send us that. Brother Conrad hadn't got it to me yet. I'm sure it's coming, but
well, that's the Portland model that the Black United Front.
Pardon?
You're talking about the Portland model that
right.
the Black United Front.
Right. I haven't ever seen it because see, I've been asking for it, and I'd like to see it. And I think that we have not developed anything that extensive. We would like to be part of helping to develop and offer our suggestions to it. But I think that I would like to have the Portland model because we would be prepared to raise that in the issues in places where we are strongly, like in Jackson or Atlanta and places like that. And I think it's very key to those areas which are predominantly black, in which in many instances you have black schools, who are not teaching any kind of Afrocentric curriculum. And sometimes you actually even have receptive people in the PTAs. Now I don't know how receptive they'll be once they really see what's going down, but I mean they are receptive people. There's some strong black folks in some positions in PTAs and things of that nature, and who are fairly conscious and who are thirsting for ways to deal with youth problems, with male, youth boy problems in terms of destructive behavior and stuff like that. So to answer your question, Honorable, no, we haven't developed a total overall curriculum. We would like to be part of developing one, and we would like to get the Portland model so we can make our comments on that.
Is your manhood program available?
I can get it sent to you from Detroit. Okay, man or woman program. Yes.
Yeah, there's a proprietor here. We're working with a lot of young people, but I think the adults that are working here at the store we're all kind of frustrated in the fact that we got a group of conscious young people, but they're not doing too good in the public school. And I think that amongst ourselves, we may have generated too elegant of an atmosphere, meaning we don't got them in here painting walls. We're not creating a very serious work ethic for them, and they're not taking that back to the public schools and getting A's and B's. Most of them are getting C's, D's, and F's. And it's frustrating for us to want them to achieve in life, but yet they're much higher. I know their consciousness is a lot higher than ours was at that point, but yet it's still not proving it, in the academic arena. And I mean, some of them don't have any feeling whether or not they should go to college, and I'm not really giving them guidance either way. I'm telling them it's a choice they have to make. But what can we do as elder young people as far as giving them guidance and encouragement?
I think we should read Malcolm carefully, because remember Malcolm said that education is our passport to the future. He said that tomorrow will belong to those who prepare for it today. And so what is that to say? I mean, that's to say, I guess Malala Karenga used to say, you go to get the A and to get away, you know what I'm saying? But I think that it's even a little deeper than that. I think if you really understand what's being taught here, then you should be able to master easily what is in those schools, you know what I'm saying? And in fact, I think that there needs to be some monitoring of the situation in the schools to some degree. In other words, the child should never be forced to tell a lie, on the test. You say that the United States is something that it never was. I think you should tell them, yeah, Thomas Jefferson did this, and George Washington did this, and the suckers were both slave owners and screw 'em. You know what I'm saying? That should be the answer on your test, Right. And it should be accurate, complete, give them what they want, but at the same time, give them the answer. And certain things in school, like math, and science, and things of that nature, are things which, we need. We got to have. We got to be able to deal with technology. And so there's no real excuse for not learning those things. There's no excuse for not learning those things. And if you really understand African history, then you understand history. You know what I'm saying? It's really a great aid to any kind of history. Because like we are the originators of people. We are the first human beings, and a lot of that history, comes from us. And so I think that it's important that we study hard. And then like I went to law school, and the reason I say I went to law school, because I could tell you about elementary school and stuff like that, but I was basically, first of all, I almost flunked out of elementary school every year, so that ain't nothing to tell you about. But by the time I got to law school, I knew. I mean, I was a conscious individual. I mean, I really was a revolutionary long before I decided to become a lawyer. And so, but when I went to law school, I was able to do a lot better because I had a command of what the reality was. I knew that the law was just a tool that I was studying, that I needed to understand in order to utilize, to understand, in order to accomplish a purpose in this world. I knew that somebody had to defend the Geronimo Pratts, the Pontiac brothers, right, and the other people. And so I used law in that way. I was able to not get knowing the law confused with self-esteem and dignity. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes people think that, if they don't capture every nuance of the white man's education, then they're lesser people, But I knew that wasn't the case, which allowed me a lot more psychological coolness in order to really comprehend what they were teaching. Because a lot of people get all shook up because they think, well, this stuff is so important, and it's important to know, but it's not as important as you are. You understand what I'm saying? This is the point I'm trying to make. And once you really understand that, then your level of confidence should really rise, and you should be able to handle it. You should be able to tackle it. It's like a doctor that's studying a disease. You study disease not because it's good, because you need to know it in order to cure it, right? And so I think that this is the type of attitude that we should all have in school. We need people to get through school. Everybody don't need to go to college, but some people do need to go to college. And in fact, the fact of the matter, they ain't letting everybody in college anyway. So, those who can get in probably need to go. You know what I'm saying? They need to go, and they need to get as much education as we can so we can be formidable in the struggle that we have. You need to help carry out the revolution in college. We need to get you in there in order to turn some of these places out. You know what I'm saying? So, like, there's a lot that needs to be done. So I think it's important that you do it. And there's ways that you can struggle and at the same time learn and get the information, which somewhat is training, somewhat is education. brother there.
Brother Chokwe, out of respect, my brother and I came down from the University of Champaign, Urbana.
Thank you, brother.
I'd like to ask two questions. One being that in Wretched of the Earth by France Fanon, he talks about the pitfalls of Black Nationalism. Can you identify any pitfalls that
He talks about the pitfalls of national consciousness, right? Right, okay. I think, there's a lot of pitfalls in national consciousness that we have had. That is a heck of a book, that's a heck of a chapter, and, every sentence almost, implicates something different, So what I think that Frantz Fanon was trying to touch, which might be useful to us, is that, secondly, first of all, he was saying that in many instances there is no national, that there's a struggle against national consciousness. National consciousness is a vital tool. It's a vital tool because national consciousness is in a very definite way more important than, quote, nationalist consciousness. So you got to distinguish the two. See, national consciousness means is that you know who you are, and this is what he was saying. That just his situation was just similar to ours, is that they had tried to talk Algerians out of the position that they were Algerians. They were trying to tell Algerians that they were essentially Frenchmen, second class, third class, whatever, But that's what they were doing. And so, like he was saying, that when the people begin to realize that they are Algerians, that they are a nation, that they are, part of the same people, then that is a powerful statement for the revolution itself. And it begins to, the reason I say it's more important than nationalism or a nationalistic consciousness, because, see, if the people don't understand who they are, then nationalism is nothing but a conversation. You see what I'm saying? And so that's why I said that's really what it is. And so, but once the people understand, then they automatically move in what has been defined as a nationalist direction, because they begin to deal with their own self-interest. They begin to deal with it as an expression not only to help themselves, but as an expression to help the rest of the world. Now, the other thing that he gets into, we talk about pitfalls of national consciousness. If I remember right, it's been a little while since I read the book, is that sometimes people confuse national consciousness with a certain narrow-mindedness. Okay, I think that that is like they become they begin to isolate their experience from the experiences of the rest of the world. Okay, they don't appreciate the fact that just like they have a right to be a nation in their nation, that other nations have that same right, and have in that, legitimately speaking, they should support struggles of other oppressed people. And so that becomes a pitfall when it really doesn't become national consciousness. Because see, national consciousness is not a statement against anybody else. It's just a statement for you. See what I'm saying? And when it becomes a statement against other folks, against other oppressed folks in particular, is what he's talking about, then in fact it becomes sometimes counterproductive, because you get involved in all kinds of conflicts which really are unnecessary. Now, national consciousness will help define for you who your enemies are, because they help to define an interest, and the people who are against that interest are people who are essentially the enemies. You see what I'm saying? So, I like I said, it's been a while since I read that chapter. In fact, when I read that, I was in Chicago. Back when I was in college in 1969 or 68 or something. But the thing is that I think that those were the points that he was trying to make. He called it pitfalls of national consciousness. And he basically, his main theme is that without national consciousness, I think that you could not carry out a struggle. And he pointed out that sometimes you become too narrowly, quote unquote, nationalistic, and you don't understand that you are, when you talk about national consciousness, you're a people, you're a nation, right? It's not just about your shade of skin, It's not just about any kind of more narrow definition, but it's you as a nation of people, with rights as human beings. That's what he's talking about.
The second part of that was, in what way should we take a stand against the imprisoning of
Well, I think that, first of all, you should start spreading information about who they are. We are finally been able to come up with some videos on like Geronimo Pratt. We will be producing a booklet before the end of this year, really hopefully by Malcolm X Day, which is going to have a rundown on a lot of the political prisoners. Every paper we put out by any means necessary, it has a list of political prisoners and prisoners of war in it. Those kinds of things should be used. That picture, there's a number of good pictures around here. Some of them I haven't even seen, but I understand they're good. The picture on Fred Hampton, I understand is a good picture. You need to show these kinds of things, especially to the youth who don't know anything about what has actually happened. A lot of us who've been around for a while, so we assume everybody knows, you know what I'm saying? Or we basically we know it, and so we don't actually stop to think. Sometimes we get mad at people. We say, well, how can these niggas act this way, given what we've been through? Sometimes we forget they don't know what we've been through, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, I think that we have to push that, and that's key. Political prisoners and prisoners of war are key to the victory in any struggle, because political prisoners and prisoners of war embody the ethic of the struggle. They are what the struggle is about, you know what I'm saying? First of all, they're generally exemplary in terms of their unwavering commitment to the struggle, to the point that they would give their life for it. Okay, that's one thing. And more importantly, that they would give their life is that they would live for it, that they would actually live for it. And secondly, they become a constant reminder of the penalty that we are paying because of oppression, because they're behind bars. And they become a constant example of injustice, you know what I'm saying? They're in jail only because of the oppressor's political will. That's the only reason. And because of their political will, which has clashed. And so I think that you have to talk about them. And I think that one of the things that I would also say about our brother Mandela, I was dismayed that he didn't talk about our political prisoners. In fact, Brother Daruba Ben Wahid checked him on it, in Harlem. He said, you should, brother, I've been in jail almost as long as you have, you know what I'm saying? You don't say nothing about me, you know what I'm saying? This is an honest question, In fact, the people who are the political prisoners are the ones who originally led the struggle on his behalf. I mean, the Jesse Jacksons of the world, and the Andrew Youngs, and the what's his name, Joke in Detroit, Coleman Youngs, and Uncle Tom Bradley's. Man, these cats, you talk about Nelson Mandela back years ago, they went and hide under the bed, you know what I'm saying? I mean, or anything that looked like it was violent struggle. I mean, that's very real. So when you got people that went out there in order to cultivate the understanding of this struggle, and African Liberation Day struggles, and even in terms of the Panthers, they used to have, and I use the Panthers as an example because they're the best known, but I mean, really, many groups, they'd sit people down inside of their, in some groups much more than the Panthers, actually, on this issue. They sit groups down inside of their little offices and stuff, and they talk to them about what was happening in Southern Africa, And this is long before some of these guys were willing to go out and get arrested for 10 minutes and then get out of jail. You see what I'm saying? And so, like, it's ridiculous for him to come over here and not to speak on that. And we have to give criticism where it's due, And so I think that that's one of the beefs that we have. And it's not just the beef that we're just talking about, but we're actually taking that to the ANC. Apparently the ANC had reached some agreement that he would not talk about the struggle in this country, of black people. It was obvious. In fact, they couldn't get, the sister's name, Winnie Mandela. They couldn't shut her up. She started talking about it anyway. She got up there talking about, this looks like Soweto to me, She said, this stuff doesn't negotiation. I don't know about this negotiation. She said, I'm ready to go back to the bush. This is what she started. This is what she said in Brooklyn. Once they got to New York, they didn't let her talk no more. But that was, but see, I think that was not good. And I think a lot of that, obviously Mandela was willing to challenge them on Palestine and stuff like that. So a lot of that, not talking about the struggle here, I'm sure had to do with people that was around him, the so-called black people here that was around him, and that's disgraceful, man. It really is. I mean, you got these people in jail, and we don't talk about it. So, like, I think that's, but the political prisoners are very important. Yes.
Yes, I want to say, brother, I really enjoyed your speech very, very much. It was very profound to the ear, and especially for the young people, the younger people coming up today. Because it's so hard for adults, to get together, our people now. For instance, I live in South Shore, was a brutal area. I worked on the police department, retired. And it's been getting manifest with gangs. And I live in a 12-unit building. And I have been around on every door and knocked at every door and tried to get people, we get together now and do something about the gang situation. Well, there's no one to go along with me, just the landlord and myself. Now you take Thursday, he had to put fences around the building to keep them out the yard and so on. The landlord and myself, we are dealing with these gangs, remember. Thursday there was 14 cars, I don't know what happened. In the front of the building, I wouldn't let the shade down because I have a handicapped son, and he do have a parking facility, and they will come and get in his spot, and he works, and he goes to school. And as soon as I leave, he leaves, someone will pull right up. But I will call the police department again. I try to wait till give them some opportunity, to leave. But they'll get there and they'll start to use all type of language. Now, I can go out and talk to them. They will listen. Some of them will listen. And some of them say, oh, no, man, I ain't. Well, here come the police and they start running. As soon as they leave, see the old white car, they return. Some of them move out and move on. And they come in and they start to call them. And I have saw the police, the commander have spoken, we have to command meeting to see, and he is telling them, we're watching you, we walk the street and watching you. And he pulled out his belly club, and he said, you want to fight me, man? I'll bush you, he is wide open, and he went to running, and he pulled his gun out. I just got away from the window because I did not want to see a bullet going in any more of these black youths here. This is my younger son. I have raised 4. This is my youngest. And he do not deal with him. He hasn't got a photo with him. He don't use drugs, anything like that. Every meeting he's there, he's going. He's ready before I am.
Well, we're very
proud. And I just wish that more young youths was here to listen to your lecture because it was very nice and I enjoyed it.
I thank you for that, and we're proud of your son and proud of you too, for the work that you've done. And I think that the sisters' dilemma is a dilemma that our people face on a daily level. If we deal with the question right, then this question of quote-unquote crime actually becomes something that will help move the struggle further in terms of organizing ourselves against it. But if we deal with it wrong, then of course it fragments us. Because the one thing about it is that no longer can anybody say that they're not feeling oppression. Because they don't feel it no other way than they feeling it through quote-unquote crime. You understand what I'm saying? So that even the so-called bougie blacks, take their cars and their TVs just like anybody else. You know what I'm saying? So I think that what's important is that we got to be out there to communicate. This kind of discussion that we could have with the sister here today is a discussion that we need to have not only here but in households. One of the things that we're working on is developing videotapes and discussions. And then you have some people over your crib. Like even if it's a semi-social setting. This is a hangout setting. They want you to talk about it, and we have to keep educating people. And we have to start groups. We got to have groups that's going to police our own neighborhoods. I mean, that's straight up. We can't depend upon the police to crack no heads. In fact, they crack our heads. That's the problem. So what we want is groups that's going to stop it for her. It's going to stop. It's going to allow her to live in a neighborhood like she should and raise children like she should. And I think that's extremely critical. Let me just pause here to say this: is that I'm here for a purpose, right? Okay, I'm raising an army. It's not to go to Saudi Arabia, right? Okay, the army I'm raising is one that's going to help us participate in this movement. People interested in being in the Malcolm X Grassroots movement or the New African People's Organization. I got a list here, and if you would like to participate in the study group, which we will probably try to start at this site, I haven't talked to the people invited me here yet, but they've been real good. I guess I'm gonna hope they're gonna carry this on. But we'd like to sit down and see what we can do. A study group looking toward building a movement which is going to help to do some of the things that need to be done in the street, some of the things that I talked about here today. And so we have actually we have a youth group called the New African Panthers too. You know, but in any event, you know, all that we can explain later. But if you're interested, put your name on this list and your address and your phone number, and then we will be back in touch. Okay. Any more questions?
When you your study groups, you have in the set curriculum?
Yeah, we start off with familiarization with. We have some history about Africans. You know, and mainly we start off talking about our situation here in this country, history of Africans here in this country. We also have a study about our organization. We go into about organization, what its principles are, what Pan-Africanism is, you know, and different things that we believe in. And so it's a curriculum. I mean, it's a laid out format. And then, but the study never ceases with us. Okay, and so like there's more in-depth studies at different points in time. I mean, I have to study, you know, all the time, and I don't, and I'm always trying to review things as well as learn new things. But the initial thing is kind of like an introduction. And one of the things we're particularly concerned about is give the people the history of the last 20 years, you know, because most of them don't know that, you know. So we kind of emphasize that in some of the introductory sessions. Right.
I was just saying, where your comment was correct. I mean, there's a huge gap in knowledge over the last 20 years.
And once we get started, it never stops. It kills me that they give us the shortest month of the year. Talk about the greatest subject in the world, you know, African history. And then it is also, it's just pitiful because, see, like in all of us, and you can't help it if you've been educated in schools. When somebody thinks, say, black history or black studies, a lot of your contemporaries will think, oh, that black stuff, you know, and you think it's something that you go into for a session or so and you learn about it, don't mean. I mean, you don't ever stop learning African history. I mean, nobody can ever know all of it. It's impossible to know all of it. And it's such a great study, such a breadth study, and it can help your self-esteem, you know, to know what our people become.
Yeah. I studied with Andy at the center, and you know, one of the things that they helped us understand was this history of resistance and how heroic it is, the Nat Turner, the MIBC, and the Palmaris and whatnot. And I was just wondering if you could pick one, you know, extraordinary military campaign of the last 20 years, and if it ain't too sensitive, just let them know how, you know, how
within the last 20 years, it's sensitive.
I mean, I started looking at some things, I'm just tripping, you know.
Well, let me just say this. I think that, you know, and the reason I know about this, by the way, is because I was a lawyer in the trial, and I read the FBI documents. But I think that if you look at what the quote-unquote Black Liberation Army did, okay, around Assata Shakur's liberation, I think that's an extraordinary military campaign. And not only do I think that that was extraordinary, but if you listen to the testimony which came out in court about the group, the dedication to training, the dedication to learning, they would sometimes practice what was called, what did they call them? You know, like they would practice for attacks that they were going to make for sometimes as long as 2 years. The patience. You know, this was also allegedly the group that was expropriating money from the Brinks trucks. But they would sometimes find a place, and they were meticulous in researching the job. You know, they would sit down, they would see, like, when the people came, you know, when they left. And then, you know, sometimes they had little notes like the guards threw snowballs. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, while they were on their job. Other times they say, very, very vigilant, very, very vigilant, very, very ready, very, very extreme. And this kind of persistence. And all of the people who they claimed was involved in this, fit-looking people. I mean, no shabby physical presence. And then the other thing that I thought was so extraordinary about them is their concern for life. Now, see, this is not something that the FBI, of course, ever emphasized. But even the informant said that the primary purpose of training, of a rehearsal, was that the least amount of bloodshed could be bloodshed as possible, all right? They were there to use enough presence to get the job done, right? So when they went to get Assata out of jail, and what essentially happened there is that Assata was locked away in a prison. Okay, Assata Shakur, for those who don't know it, was called the soul of the Black Liberation Army. This is the name the press gave her. She was a sister who had been a Black Panther, and when they started destroying the Black Panther Party, she went underground and started fighting with the Black Liberation Army to help rid the city of drugs, of police who were attacking brothers and sisters, and also of raising funds to help the Black Liberation Movement. And so they wanted her on some 8 different charges, allegedly. Mainly, they claimed that she had knocked off a certain amount of drug houses, and so they were looking for her on these charges. They finally arrested her on the turnpike in New Jersey in 1973, shot her, paralyzed her temporarily. She recovered from that paralyzation. They killed, a cop was killed in the incident, and it was a brother that was with her, a friend of hers, a good close friend of hers who was killed. They took her to jail and they celebrated her capture because at this point they said that they had destroyed the Black Liberation Army. And they celebrated her capture, and it was a big thing in New York. So they put her in jail, and her case came kind of like a cause celebrity. In other words, a number of people in New York particularly, and some around the country, and actually some around the world, were supporting her case, trying to get her out because they felt that she was set up. She won all 8 cases that they was trying to arrest her on. They either got dismissed or the juries found her not guilty. But then what happened is they took her and convicted her of the shooting incident which occurred with the police. They claimed, knowing that she didn't shoot the cop, because she couldn't have, she was paralyzed at the time he was shot. They had shot her already. But they convicted her and sentenced her to life plus 30 years. And so what happened was that she had been in jail. I had the good fortune of representing her in one trial, which was dismissed, and I had a chance to meet her. And it wasn't until years later I understood when she told me. I asked her how her appeal was going. I said, Brother Chokwe, I don't know, but I ain't going to be here forever, is what she told me. But, and so like, what happened was that the Black Liberation Army, according to what the FBI says, this was something that they had waited on for almost a year. In fact, according to the FBI, they actually started a protest about her. They helped to instigate a protest about her prison conditions where she was presently located in order to force the state to move her to another institution where it would be easier to accomplish the objective, all right? Okay. But this kind of like shows, if it's true, and I think it is, okay, the orchestration between the political movement and the defense movement, the military movement. Because the day that she was liberated now was 2 or 3 days before a massive march on the United Nations where some 5,000 to 10,000 people marched on the United Nations and presented a petition to the UN claiming abuses by blacks in this country. And in fact, her tape with a speech on it was waiting for her when we arrived at the place where we had the rally. It was a tape there waiting from her. And so she gave the first speech, you know, and everybody, and so this was the thing. But essentially, they basically came into the, according to what the police said, it said people came into the prison. It was 2 men who came in. The way it was the prison is you had a gate out here, and then the prison would be way inside, right? So you had to come through this gate, and then there was guards here. You had to get past this gate, and they would usually take a van and ride you in to the prison, and then the prison, they would, you know, you go into the building, and there was bars, of course, separating the people, and there were guards in there, right? So what happened is that the first 2 people came, and they went on into the prison, and they had it synchronized that at approximately the same second, right around the same time, when these people who had gotten inside, and apparently they had somehow or another gotten some guns concealed on the premises that they had gotten to, all right? At the same moment that they picked up their guns and held the guards at bay inside of the prison and told them to open the gate, these people had 2 more people who were just coming in as supposed visitors, had also seized these guards here, and these guards forced them to ride them to the place, to the prison, right? And so just as they were getting the sister out here, they were coming up with the van here. You got in the van, and then they basically left the prison premises. Now, here's the thing about how that human conduct pays off. During the course of the ride, the guards were scared to death. I mean, in fact, anytime white people see black folks with guns, in fact, I'm telling you what happened. Here in the situation was in a couple of incidents, they had a cop when the cops were shooting at them on it. This wasn't this time. It was another time. The cop this cop got so shook up that these brothers and sisters shot back, is that they had to. He couldn't remember his testimony, so they had to and in fact they had to use hypnosis. They had to hypnotize. And so when he started telling about what happened, he said, I was there. I opened the door, and all of a sudden there was niggas. Niggas with guns. And so like one of the brothers named Kwesi Balagoon, who was subsequently captured and arrested, he wrote a poem called Niggas with Guns. It was a hell of a poem. But anyway, they said niggas with guns, so this is a very frightening experience for these white people. But throughout this van ride where they had these guards in the truck, they were constantly reassuring them. So nothing's gonna happen to you, everything's gonna be all right. In fact, one of the guards dropped something out of her nervousness. They picked it up, gave it to her, everything's fine, everything. They were so assured this happened in over a matter of seconds now, that the guards, because apparently the brother who was driving the van made a wrong turn. He was going down because it was a little funny road, so he went the wrong way. And so they told him, no, don't go that way. This guards told him. They said, like, go the other way, because this is the way to get out of here. And he said, if you go that way, you're going to run right into the state troopers. And they knew enough about the terrain to once being straightened out, they realized that was correct. And so they went the other way, and they got out. Now, what that says that those guards were more afraid of the police than they were of the brothers. Okay, see what I'm saying? They knew what they would do, because they knew what they had done in the past. They would kill the brothers, they'd kill everybody in the van. So that's why, and just to skip ahead a little bit, Kwesi Balagoon, who was caught and later on tried, he gave an opening statement at his trial, which I thought was amazing. I mean, it not only captured the essence of the whole question of the struggle, but it got off into the real human quality. He says, as a Black Liberation Army member, we've always understood the quality of human rights. You know what I'm saying? And he says that we always have endeavored. He pointed out the incidents where they could have killed people, and they did. They avoided it meticulously. They could have killed people who probably deserved to die. You know what I'm saying? Really, a lot of it. And they didn't do it because they realized that there's every action was not only action, but it was a statement. It was a statement of who they were, who they were, and what they represented. So anyway, they got off the prison grounds, and they had it set up where immediately after they got out, the police was just totally befuddled. They had them going west, they had them going north, they had them going south. I think they had them going every way but into the river. You know what I'm saying? Okay, or into the ocean or whatever it was. So they had them. They were just totally confused as to what had happened. But later on, they supposed to have found out that what happened is that they got the van off, and then they switched into several cars, and then they switched at another point into other cars. And essentially what the Liberation Army was doing at that time is that they had these sometimes Caucasians and sometimes sisters. All right, it depends on the situation and what kind of community they were in. But what they would do is that they would be the drivers. All right, okay. So especially since white folks are so racist, and they figured that no white folks ever obey any instructions that black people give. You know what I'm saying? Is that they would see these vans and stuff riding, and they don't see no. They're looking for black people, and they see like a white man and a white woman driving a van. Look like a couple. So they just let them go through. And that happened for 8 years. You know what I'm saying? Before they finally figured out there was some connection there. And then when it finally broke, the first thing that came out was these are some black folks who've been involved, who basically these white folks got doing this, that, and the other. I was never so proud as in my life when I sat through that trial, and I saw how allegedly, here again we say allegedly, okay, how these brothers handled that situation. I mean, they basically took all authority to themselves. I mean, white people didn't even know what they were doing that extent. I mean, really. I mean, plus they had screened them for over 2 years. They got them to do other projects. At times they had them collect information on the Klan, and they had them collect other intelligence information on the government. And they would come back and they would study information. They would have critique sessions on whether this person. In fact, most of the white folks never even saw. And these were mostly old SDS folks, old-time white folks who had, in some way or another, shown that they felt that they were willing to make sacrifices to blacks. And the one thing that they absolutely required is that they committed themselves to black self-determination. You know, the idea that blacks had a right to independence over land. You know what I'm saying? And so, and then the other thing was is that, but they would, it was apparent from the trial. You know, they would get things settled, then they would tell so and so and say, well, go get the white folks. Actually, they didn't say go get the white folks. They said go get the crackers. You know what I'm saying? And so, but then what they would do is that they would do what had to be done, and so I think that was good. I mean, in fact, to tell you the truth, their screening process was so good. There was one white person who never should have been involved, but that didn't. Her name was Bodine, but she didn't. She didn't actually. She did not. She was called in at the last moment. Had a marginal relationship with the whole situation, but she didn't. She never talked or anything. She got a break because of who she was, because she was white. Okay, but she never talked. None of the white people ever said anything. Parts, to some degree, they didn't know everything, but they never said anything. The person that cracked was actually a militaristic blood. You know what I'm saying? When I say a militaristic blood, one who was a good soldier but had no politics. You know what I'm saying? And that was in summing up the situation, one of the flaws that they saw in what had happened. And it's easy to compromise. It's easy for young brothers to say, well, look, I don't want to just sit around listening to this politics. I just want to get down. You know what I'm saying? But see, you're dangerous if you don't listen to the politics. You're dangerous. You're dangerous to us if you don't listen to the politics. I mean, that's true, because this was the problem. This guy had been a good soldier for over 10 years, because he actually knew the guy. He actually worked with the provisional government of the Republic of New Afrika as a security person at one time. Probably been through his Chicago with us sometime. Good security man. I mean, you wouldn't want to mess with him if he was there. But he was just that, a soldier. He had been in Vietnam, and we found out later that he had done some really hideous kind of things in Vietnam to some of the Vietnam people. Then when he got out, he joined the Army, and then when he looked like Army was having a downturn, he joined the Army again. You know what I'm saying? So that's the way he looked at it. And so he wound up testifying against us, and really it's him that gave them what they needed to convict some of the people.
And this guy, he's still under the witness protection?
Yeah, he's still hidden someplace. His name is Tyrone Rising. Yeah, Tyrone Rising. Huh? It's another name. His African name was. God, I stopped using the dude's African name. I do know it though. It'll come back to me. God, it'll come back to me. Let me think. But anyway, but this was and and actually, I don't give you a name. I will give you pictures of them. We have pictures and stuff. We need to get those around. But see, this is the reality. Is that that was the flaw. And then afterwards they tried to sum up say that you got to look at not only it wasn't a problem. A lot of stuff came out. They had agents in the group. No, that was not true. In fact, they had a very powerful program against COINTELPRO because they were very, according to the police again, they were very closely linked to the National Task Force for COINTELPRO Research and Litigation, which basically apparently was advising them as to ways to avoid COINTELPRO, ways of using the phone and surveillance and counter-surveillance and all that kind of stuff. But what was true is that you have to look at people not only for the ones who are agents, but ones who have the capacity to turn. And so people have character flaws, and that's why we all have to challenge ourselves. There's a little bit of agent in all of us, you know what I'm saying? And you have to challenge yourself. You got to challenge. Anytime you get weak, and even in the way you eat and carry, in the way that you deal with your presence, and in terms of doing things that you know you shouldn't be doing, dealing with those, sneaking into those drugs if you do that, or whatever, that's a weakness which shows up, and it showed up in that situation too, where it was a flaw later on. But anyway, I would say that is probably one of the more, Assata's liberation is probably one of the more amazing military feats by the African underground in the last 20 years. And there's a lot of feats now. It's not just that. I mean, you had situations like during the rebellions in the 60s where we tied down whole cities for days. You had a lot of stuff that went on where actually, and I think that this is the way that the underground got a little loose in terms of including people, is because, see, in the first part of the struggle, brothers, just street brothers, were real, they were some good soldiers. mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, real conservative. I mean, you know, and they would go out and sacrifice for the movement. I mean, you know, they go out and do things, and they would bring it in. And so, but as the struggle drags out, as it drags out and becomes less impressive, and it becomes more of a job, then, you know, you have to have those politics. You see what I'm saying? If you don't have that politics and realize where you're going, just being from the streets ain't gonna do it. You see what I'm saying? And so, like, and sometimes there's a few things you get in the streets that you got to get out of you. As a matter of fact, you know what I'm saying? So that becomes a reality. So that's but that I would say that was one. And the Black Liberation Army period didn't start then. The Black Liberation Army started about 70 and 71, and when they first came on the scene, it was very effective at dealing with drug houses and attacking police who had attacked people, and but they ran into some problems, and a lot of people got shot and arrested, and a lot of other things. But it lives on. It lives on. So, but you know, it'll live on as long as you resist. You resist, it'll live. If you stop resisting, then it'll die. And and the kind of person you are, is it going to be the kind of person it is? You know. So I think that's what's important.
So when you talk about screening, a lot of people tell us, the younger generation, that one of the critical mistakes that the Black Panther Party made was that, just like you said, it didn't screen enough. But how does an organization do that? I mean, how does it have a screen?
There's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways. I mean, you know, at this point, I don't really think I should answer that. Okay. Okay. I mean, no, don't be sorry, because don't ever be afraid to ask a question. Okay. I mean, you know, and I know it's asked with a good intention, but that is something that, like, for instance, if you work with us, you will learn. Okay. Okay, you will learn. But there's a lot of ways. I will say this much about it. Probably the best thing that you do is that you you try to clean yourself up in terms of your behavior, and you get to know other people, you know, and you get to know their behavior, you know what I'm saying? Because, see, if everybody's acting like a nigga, then it's hard to identify a nigga, you see what I'm saying? You know, I mean, and that's extremely important. Because, see, like, one of the things is that a lot of times we couldn't identify agents because everybody was that crazy, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, everybody was acting like a provocateur, you know, because they couldn't control. They had, you know, every issue they had to take to the death, you know what I'm saying? You know, and then it was like, you know, everybody was cheating on their lady, you know. I mean, everybody. And so, like, you know, sometimes agents would come into groups and disrupt the groups, really by, you know, mess with other people's ladies and things of that nature. But see, sometimes everybody was cheating on their lady, so you couldn't really find an agent like that, you know what I'm saying? And so, I'm serious. I'm very serious. All these things have an impact. Because first of all, your lady might be what saved you. You know what I'm saying? You know, okay, you know, it probably will be, you know. So if you're not treating her right, you got a problem. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you know, these are all things which come into place. And so it's a serious movement. And there's nobody flawless. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, nobody's flawless. But at the same time, you got to be willing to recognize your errors and go to tackle them. So I guess what I'm pointing out to you is the conduct is something that you use, you know, to use to screen people. You look for signals, you know. And it's also a little easier for us to do now than it was back when the Panthers were doing it. Because, see, the Panthers, for all intents and purposes, were starting out. So they didn't have a chance to live with the people for 20 years that they're working with, you know. And so they had to start. So everybody was new. Whereas some of us have lived for 20 years, and so we might not know about everybody, but we know about the people who live for 20 years, and that gives you some place to start with. You know, it gives you somewhere to start with. And I think that's very important. You know, it's very important. That's why struggles usually don't occur in a very short period of time. A lot of times they take a while. You know. Any other questions or comments? I appreciate the interest, and I don't want this to be the last time I come back. So, or that other people come back, because there's a number of other people who work for organizations that I'd certainly like to come through here and to share things with you. I think that Chicago is very important to the struggle of African people in the world. You know, America is, you know, it's important to America, but it's also important to the world. There's a lot of information here. There's a lot of Africans here. I mean, you got how many of y'all here? Like
1,500,000.
1,500,000. That's a lot of people, and so that means that we have to do some things. You know, we have to do some things. We have to be training grounds for the revolution. We have to train by asserting ourselves in our community, but understand in your mind that that kind of training has to materialize at some point in the concrete governing of land, taking of land. We believe land in the Deep South as well as land in Africa. All of it. So that's what you're training for. To me, that's what you're training for. And I think that you got to keep that in mind. And we got to take this empire apart. Who knows? We might decide to come on up the Mississippi River and take this part of it too. But the point is that you really, really, really have to, start working on these things. Okay. Any other questions or comments? We're going to end that. Okay. Thank you very much. And we've heard the speech. The work starts here. All right. Okay.